Chapter 162. Her mother isn't Vietnamese. She feared that when she wasn't around, Chu Yihan might come to retrieve the sword. So, she instructed Jilin that she should only reveal her whereabouts if Chu Yihan specifically inquired about her. Princess Shangping was also waiting for Su Yingxue. There were several dishes laid out on her table, and when Su Yingxue arrived, she had just finished her meal. Shangping stood up and greeted her with a smile. Su Yingxue raised her hand to halt her. "Princess, there's no need for formalities between us. Are you satisfied with the third prince's fate today?" Lianer knelt and kowtowed to Su Yingxue, still sobbing. "Thank you, Miss Su, for seeking justice for our princess. Our princess ate a bit more for dinner tonight." Su Yingxue nodded. "In that case, princess, can you tell me now?" Shangping invited her to sit by the bedside for their conversation. As they faced each other, Shangping couldn't help but admire Su Yingxue's dignified demeanor despite her injuries. She was prepared to share everything she knew. "Dr. Su's mother was likely my mother's best friend before they turned 10. When I was young, my mother introduced her friends to me one by one. The only one missing was the person who created the cloud patterns with her." "So, you mean my mother and your mother haven't seen each other since they were 10? Su Yingxue's eyes narrowed, and she was filled with perplexity. "Yes, and my mother's friend has a unique identity, unlike other nobles in the Yu Kingdom. She is not from the Yu Kingdom," Shangping emphasized. Su Yingxue stood up abruptly. "If she's not from Yu Kingdom, what is her identity?" "She is the Grand Princess." Lianer suddenly interrupted her with a joyful expression, rushing in and panting. "Princess, ninth prince has arrived." Shangping's heart trembled, and she instinctively checked her appearance and attire. She went out to welcome Chu Yihan, but Chu Yihan walked past her and approached Su Yingxue, holding her hand as he asked, "Why are you here?" Su Yingxue was still lost in her thoughts about her mother's background, but with Chu Yihan's arrival, she changed the subject. "I'm here to check on the princess and see how she's recovering." Shangping echoed her with a soft hum. "Are you finished?" Chu Yihan inquired. Su Yingxue confirmed that she had completed her examination, and Chu Yihan took her away. Throughout their encounter, he never glanced at Shangping. However, Shangping followed them and watched as Chu Yihan and Su Yingxue walked away side by side until their figures disappeared. On the way, Chu Yihan's gaze was filled with concern. "Mo Chi mentioned that you went to the stream to clean your sword. One went to investigate and found signs of an unresolved fight. Do you know what happened?" Su Yingxue shook her head reflexively. Nothing happened. She had yet to figure out how to disclose her conflict with Hong Lian to Chu Yihan. After all, Hong Lian sought her mother's letter, and she had directly taken away Hong Lian's best assassin, which could be considered a significant feud. Furthermore, she still didn't know the nature of Chu Yihan's relationship with Hong Lian. She couldn't speak hastily. "Why are you injured?" Chu Yihan's brows furrowed deeply. "I was rolling around in the forest this afternoon. After one returned, I bandaged myself up." "It's nothing." Su Yingxue offered a well-intentioned white lie. She truly hadn't meant to deceive Chu Yihan. She simply didn't want him to worry. However, when she noticed that he wasn't leading them back to their residence, she inquired, "Where are you taking me?" "We're going to the Martial Virtue Hall. The Empress suspects that Chu Ziyuan's injury might be related to you and wants to conduct an investigation." Chapter 163. Chu Ziyuan's injury. Seeing Su Yingxue's slight stunned, he immediately placed his hand on her shoulder. His broad palm grasped her petite, rounded shoulder, and his deep voice reassured her, "Don't worry. With me here, even if Chu Xiuan is injured, it won't be a problem." Su Yingxue awkwardly chuckled. How did you manage to guess correctly again? However, this was a part of her deal with Shangping. If she told Chu Yihan, she would inevitably contradict her previous statements and have to disclose everything. Su Yingxue decided to endure it. The Martial Virtue Hall was splendid and brightly lit. The Empress had been crying by Chu Minjiwan's side. When she saw Su Yingxue enter, she pointed at her as if she had encountered an archenemy. "Emperor, it's her who caused Ziyuan's injury. Xiuan is so badly hurt. You must seek justice for him, Emperor." Her cries grew even more miserable. Chu Minjiwan's face remained cold, and he didn't pay much attention to her tears. There was even a hint of disgust in his eyes. Noble Consort Xiao noticed this and lightly stroked her nails before speaking. Empress, you should first inquire. What if you accuse someone wrongly? After all, the third prince is still unconscious. Noble Consort Xiao, what business is it of yours? The empress gritted her teeth and gave her a fierce glare with her eyes red from crying. Noble Consort Xiao, gazing at her meticulously manicured and exquisite nails, snorted. What? Even as a noble consort, don't I have the right to speak in front of the emperor? I just want to make things difficult for you. Is that not allowed? Noble Consort Xiao thought. The empress was so furious that her entire body trembled. Just as she was about to argue with Noble Consort Xiao, Chu Mingyuan sternly shouted, Enough! Empress, didn't you suspect that Su Yingxue had something to do with Ziyuan's injury? Now, in my presence, if you have evidence, present it. Su Yingxue tilted her head. It was evident to anyone in the hall that Chu Mingyuan was impatient with the empress, who was seeking his help in this matter. Su Yingxue was also curious. Could the empress detect the musk scent left on her arrowhead? Year, summon the court physicians. The empress wiped away her tears and waved her hand, instructing Chu Chengye to bring in 2 court physicians. Chu Chengye had just finished examining Chu Xiuwen. His face resembled a stormy sky. When he entered, he gave Su Yingxue a fierce glare. The 2 court physicians knelt in front of Chu Mingyuan. Chu Mingyuan first expressed concern. How is Ziyuan's condition? One of the court physicians replied, Emperor, the third prince's injuries are severe. He has been wounded by a fierce tiger in multiple places, and his leg bone was bitten. I'm afraid he will require several months of careful recuperation. Su Yingxue ruffled her hair. It seemed that she had been too lenient. Perhaps she should have used a heavier dose of musk scent. In that case, Chu Xiuwen would have lost half his life. Chu Mingyuan felt deeply for his son. He instructed the court physicians to take good care of him and then inquired, The empress summoned you. What have you discovered on Xiuwen? Another older court physician spoke slowly, Emperor, on the surface, it appears that the third prince was wounded by a fierce tiger. However, one found something unusual in the wound on the third prince's face. In that wound, there was the scent of musk. In the midst of spring, when wild beasts are in heat, they would target the third prince upon detecting the musk scent. Therefore, I suspect that the third prince's severe injury was intentionally caused by someone. The slightly younger court physician beside him added, Furthermore, the third prince was injured and developed a fever. He kept mentioning that Su Yingxue harmed him. This matter is likely connected to Miss Su. Emperor, you have heard it, haven't you? With the testimony of the court physicians, it's evident that Xiuwen was poisoned by Su Yingxue. She has a ruthless heart and great audacity to have done such a cruel thing to Xiuwen. The empress hastily knelt in front of Chu Mingyuan and cried. Chapter 164. Su Yingxue can withstand your injustice? Su Yingxue raised her lips in a smile. Your Highness, are you perhaps too hasty in your judgment? Are you accusing me based solely on the court physician's testimony? Su Yingxue. Chu Mingyuan's voice deepened, carrying the authority of an emperor. Su Yingxue immediately knelt and spoke earnestly, Emperor, one have been wrongfully accused. I implore you to investigate this matter. Ye mentioned that when Xiuwen was unconscious, he repeatedly claimed that you harmed him. Were you with Xiuwen just before the tiger attacked him? Chu Mingyuan's deep gaze carried a sharp edge. While staring at Su Yingxue, he exerted considerable pressure. However, Su Yingxue maintained her straight posture while kneeling. Emperor, it is true that I and the third prince rode into the forest together. But what does that prove? Does it mean that it was my fault that the tiger attacked the third prince instead of me? A trace of grievance filled Su Yingxue's eyes. It's not your fault, Chu Yihan coldly affirmed. The cold glint in his eyes also contained a warning directed at Chu Mingyuan. Chu Mingyuan snorted, but had no intention of arguing with Chu Yihan. But the court physicians claimed that there was a musk scent on Ziyuan's wound. How do you explain that? You are a physician. You should be aware of the properties of musk. It's not uncommon for you to carry musk with you. Chu Mingyuan was much more incisive than the empress, hitting the nail on the head. Su Yingxue held her head high. Carrying muskiness is indeed not unusual. But if I wanted to harm the third prince, why would one harm myself as well? Today, the third prince was chased by a tiger, and I was chased by a lion. Could it be that one plotted against the third prince and had to sacrifice my own life? Noble Consort Xiao, supporting her head lazily, chimed in, Miss Su, what you're saying makes perfect sense. Who would harm others and willingly sacrifice their own life? Moreover, one is a prince, and the other is the Marquis' daughter. Chu Mingyuan pondered for a while but couldn't find any fault in Su Yingxue's argument. However, the Empress was sobbing hysterically. Emperor, the two court physicians are witnesses. Ziyuan's wound had a musky smell, and he repeatedly claimed that Su Yingxue harmed him. Xiuan is a good child, and he would never lie. Emperor, even if you don't trust the court physicians, you can't distrust Xiuan. Nonsense. I could also argue that he's deliberately framing her. Chu Yihan shot a cold look at the Empress. The Empress was infuriated. Ninth Prince, you're blatantly taking her side. Am not. If Imperial sister-in-law isn't convinced, I can bring Chu Xiuan here and have him repeat it. When Chu Yihan became resolute, he wouldn't yield to anyone. The Empress was rendered speechless. Chu Qingye quickly intervened. Imperial uncle, you can't. My third brother is severely injured and unconscious. He can't withstand the jolts. Then can Su Yingxue withstand your accusations? Chu Yihan's dark eyes gazed over, provoking Chu Qingye's anger. Indeed, his imperial uncle was showing favoritism towards Su Yingxue. Enough, both of you. Be silent. Chu Mingyuan rubbed the space between his eyebrows and shifted his gaze onto Su Yingxue. She maintained a straight posture while kneeling, revealing no flaws. On the Empress' side, there was no substantial evidence, which only fueled his frustration. Su Yingxue, it's one thing for Xiuan to say confused things, but can you truly explain the musk scent on his wound? Chu Mingyuan could only use this point to question Su Yingxue. Su Yingxue also thought of a reason. Emperor, may I inquire whether the tiger that chased after the third prince was male or female? Chu Mingyuan hadn't delved into this detail. He turned to Chu Qingye. It was a tigress, Chu Qingye replied. Chapter 165. Noble Consort Xiao is an interesting person in that case. I thought about the possible presence of musk on the third prince's wound. Go on. Chu Mingyuan examined her closely. Just as the court physicians mentioned, spring is the mating season for wild beasts. Tigresses also need to mate, and they may carry traces of male musk. What's so unusual about it? It injured the third prince again. Is it so illogical for the third prince's wound to have musk on it? Su Yingxue blinked her big, watery eyes, sincerity filling them. After she spun such a tale, everyone present found no valid reason to refute her. Especially the court physicians who had just spoken, their faces turned even greener, and they seemed to wish they could slap themselves. You're using sophistry. You're the one who harmed my son. The Empress was on the verge of hysteria. Su Yingxue had already said everything, so how could she be in the right? No, she couldn't be in the right now. Emperor, 1 a.m. willing to testify for Dr. Su. She did not intentionally harm the third prince. When Lin Cixi received the news, she rushed into the hall and knelt with Su Yingxue. Behind her, Lin Outyin, the demon who protected his daughter, also came. Emperor, Dr. Su is a benevolent doctor. She would never do anything to harm others. Moreover, she has no grudge against the third prince. Why would she harm the prince? This is a serious crime. Chu Mingyuan's already furrowed brows tightened even more. Nonsense. Lin Outyin and Lin Cixi, both of you have been bribed by Su Yingxue, haven't you? I will not forgive you. The Empress roared hysterically. At this moment, the only difference between her and the shrew in the market was a phoenix crown. Lin Cixi sneered and said, Father and one haven't been bribed. Ordinary people can't buy us. Lin Outyin affirmed that he was as steadfast as his daughter. Disappointed, Chu Mingyuan glanced at the Empress. All right, I've made my judgment. This matter has nothing to do with Su Yingxue. Su Yingxue, you may leave now. He firmly pronounced his decision and released Su Yingxue. The Empress was almost unhinged. "Emperor, how can you do this? How can you let Su Yingxue go? She harmed Xiuwen. Xiuwen is our son. What else do you expect me to do? Do you have any evidence? Has anyone witnessed her harming Xiuwen firsthand? Do you want me to unjustly convict someone?" Chu Mingyuan angrily shook off the Empress and turned to leave. Proceed to Consort Xiang's palace. His departure at this moment was a cutting remark, plunging deeply into the Empress' heart. Noble Consort Xiao observed the weeping Empress and felt some sympathy. TSK. Empress, it's better to return to the palace and rest early. This is truly embarrassing. Noble Consort Xiao, it's not your place to discuss my mother. Chu Qingye shouted at her. Noble Consort Xiao sneered, disdainful of arguing with someone of lower rank. However, as she passed by Su Yingxue, she beamed radiantly. Miss Su's performance today was truly splendid. One have a reward for you. Thank you, Your Majesty. Su Yingxue found the reward puzzling but sensed that Noble Consort Xiao was an intriguing person. Let's go, Dr. Su. I'll escort you back. Once everyone departed, Lin Cixi held Su Yingxue's hand joyfully, reminiscent of a child. She didn't feel any pressure from Chu Yihan whatsoever. While walking, she smiled at Su Yingxue. Dr. Su, you're amazing. You taught the third prince a lesson. He could only suffer in silence. Just thinking about it makes me feel better. Suddenly, Su Yingxue sensed an immense pressure behind her. She turned around and saw Chu Yihan looking at her with a dark expression. Chapter 166. Imperial Uncle Ferocious. She promptly pushed Lin Cixi away and cautioned her. Next time you do something wrong, don't reveal your identity to others. Chu Yihan might appear out of nowhere. Lin Cixi was still a little stunned. Suddenly, she felt a coldness that was like a 10,000-year-old iceberg. She turned around and saw Chu Yihan, and her legs trembled. Remembering that Chu Yihan was Chu Ziyuan's imperial uncle, she fled like a rabbit. Only Su Yingxue was left standing alone under the moonlight. She faced Chu Yihan alone. As soon as Chu Yihan walked over, Su Yingxue obediently placed her hands in front of her chest. Chu Yihan did not speak, but the cold air and pressure he was releasing grew heavier and heavier as time passed. Your Highness, if you intended harm to Chu Xiuwen, why didn't you inform me? Chu Yihan questioned sternly. What? Su Yingxue was so surprised that her mind was filled with question marks. If you had let me assist you, I could have directly taken Chu Ziyuan's life. Su Yingxue was rendered speechless. This imperial uncle, wasn't that too ruthless? Your Highness, in truth, one didn't want to harm him. One simply found him distasteful. Cixi also mentioned that one of her cousins was harmed by Chu Xiuwen. How loathsome is it for someone like him to lead such a dazzling life, just because he's a prince? Su Yingxue gritted her teeth, her face radiating hatred. She silently prayed, Your Highness, please don't see through my act. Don't see through it. That's right. I intentionally harmed Chu Xiuwen, but I can't tell you. Never mind. Don't harm yourself in the future. Chu Yihan gently ruffled her hair, as if consoling a child. Su Yingxue lifted her head and met his profound gaze. His eyes resembled an abyss, dark and unfathomable, tinged with coldness and iciness. Yet she couldn't resist wanting to gaze at him a bit longer. The more she looked, the more she desired. Under the moonlight, the tenderness in his eyes was enchanting. Su Yuro observed their interactions from a distance. She tore her handkerchief in frustration, suppressing her anger. Why? What gave Su Yingxue the right? She had stolen the limelight at this spring banquet. She had captured Chu Chengye's attention and ensnared his heart. She even made Chu Yihan so partial to her. What right did she have? Su Yingxue, just you wait. Su Yuro clenched her teeth. She didn't return to the manor that night and hurried straight to Lu Shulan's place. The next day, Su Yingxue resumed her medical consultations and headed to Tongchang Medical Center. She had been absent for 2 days, and Manager Qi was tirelessly busy in the clinic. Upon Su Yingxue's return, Manager Qi presented a series of plans. He suggested that the clinic could be expanded to twice its size, admit more patients, open additional wards, and even establish a branch in the western part of the city to revive Tongchang Medical Center's reputation. Manager Qi was a capable and detail-oriented individual. Su Yingxue glanced at the plan he had formulated and readily approved it. After Manager Qi explained further, he hesitated and said, "Miss, the idea is excellent, but in the long run, our income might become somewhat tight, especially since you allocated a substantial sum to Miss Wu for opening the Thousand Jiao Pavilion. What about the income from the grain and oil shop? Allocate it all for investment in the clinic. And Sister Jinyin's initial investment mustn't fall short. Even if she doesn't request it, check with her across the street. If she still needs money, you must not be stingy. You can only give her more, not less. Understand?" Su Yingxue urged. He proudly declared, "I've led a smooth life as a prince. I don't have grand ambitions. As long as I'm happy, that's enough. However, I've always treated people sincerely. If I say I'll give you half of my earnings, then I will. Come to my bookstore in a couple of days, and we'll share the spoils." After flaunting his manuscript, Chu Jinling took his leave. Su Yingxue saw him off and felt that something was amiss. She was collaborating with him on writing a book, so how did it turn into sharing the proceeds? Bah! Although the wording might not have been the best, 2 days later, Su Yingxue wrapped up her current tasks and went to his bookstore as agreed. She had assumed that Chu Jinling was a casual person, and his bookstore would be no different from those on the street. However, she was in for a surprise. Chu Jinling's bookstore was not only spacious, but also housed many renowned authors. She entered through the main door. The room was filled with the fragrance of ink. The air was still filled with the freshness of bamboo leaves. The bookstore was divided into inner and outer halls. The outer hall had dozens of large bookshelves, neatly categorized with various types of books. The store had dedicated staff to prevent book theft and to explain and collect books. Chapter 168. Care for her? As for the inner hall, it was indeed a paradise for scholars. A folding screen separated the reading rooms for men and women. Outside the windows on both sides, there were picturesque views, casting the figures of scholars in a setting that resembled an otherworldly paradise. Perhaps it was the ambience, but those who came here to read possessed remarkable qualities. They were neither noisy nor disruptive, quietly engrossed in their books, either copying or taking notes. The atmosphere wasn't as formal as that of an academy, but it exuded an even greater sense of elegance and charm. Su Yingxue was invited into the backyard. She was aware that behind Chu Jinling's bookstore, there was a place for relaxation. However, what she didn't anticipate was that this space was connected to a private residence. It boasted beautiful mountains, serene waters, and breathtaking scenery. There were artificial hills with meandering streams, and carp ponds beneath bridges, and upon passing through an archway, one would find themselves in an open-sided hall. If one listened carefully, the sweet calls of cuckoo birds could be heard around the hall. Their crisp and melodious sounds filled the air. Chu Jinling was seated, engrossed in a game of chess with someone. Upon seeing Su Yingxue, his eyes brightened. Annie, come over here. I'm being bullied to death by Imperial Uncle." The moment he spotted Su Yingxue, he pouted and complained about a child, pointing at Chu Yihan. "Imperial Uncle won't let me have a single move. He's been beating me so badly that I have nowhere left to place my pieces." Chu Yihan, clad in a long purple and gold robe, held a white chess piece in his hand. He responded sternly, "A loss is a loss. Why are you making it sound so dignified?" Chu Jinling pursed his lips and put on a pitiful expression in front of Su Yingxue. He appeared weak and wronged, evoking sympathy. How pitiable. Su Yingxue took a white chess piece from his chess box and placed it on the chessboard. Thump. "Your Highness, the 9th prince hasn't lost yet." Su Yingxue tilted her head, her expression filled with pride. Chu Yihan tossed the black chess piece into the chess box with a faint smile on his lips. "I concede." Chu Jinling remained unconvinced. He rolled up his sleeves and exclaimed, "Imperial Uncle, don't be so biased. You can freely defeat me, but with Annie, you just surrender directly. Your heart has twisted. Chu Yihan's expression remained indifferent as he gestured toward Su Yingxue. There. His heart had already taken a different direction. A hint of embarrassment flickered across Su Yingxue's face. Wasn't he being a little too direct? Chu Jinling quickly stood up. Goodbye, Imperial Uncle. He left in a huff, refusing to stay and witness their affectionate interaction. Woof. This was simply too much of a tease. Su Yingxue and Chu Yihan hadn't seen each other in a few days. Now that she saw him, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. Chu Yihan had put considerable effort into their meeting today. He had arranged for Chu Jinling to visit the clinic to find her, and then brought her to this remarkable place. With such splendid scenery, his striking countenance, and his kind treatment of her. Come here. Chu Yihan extended his hand, bringing her over to sit beside him. His fingers lightly grazed her wrist, touching the most tender skin on her arm. Su Yingxue felt a faint electric sensation as his fingertips transmitted a gentle current from her wrist to her skin, causing her entire nervous system to quiver slightly. Your Highness, I want to ask you something. Chu Yihan's sudden question snapped Su Yingxue out of her reverie. She gave her cheeks a light pat and cleared her mind of any romantic notions. With a gaze of pure innocence, she looked at him. Please go ahead. Do you happen to know of a poison called chaotic flower? Su Yingxue's eyes dimmed slightly, and even her voice took on a more somber tone. Why does your Highness suddenly inquire about this? Could it be related to Hong Lian? She had harmed Hong Lian, so why was he showing such concern for her? Chapter 169. Does your Highness care about her? Su Yingxue did not know why she cared so much about the relationship between Chu Yihan and Hong Lian. However, when she thought of how much Chu Yihan cared about Hong Lian, she was filled with anger. Chu Yihan had a perplexed expression in his eyes. He had asked just one question, so why was she suddenly upset? Inside this immaculate chamber, a folding screen separated the space. Emochi emerged from behind the screen and addressed Su Yingxue. Miss Su, your medical skills are exceptional, and your mother is the foremost female physician in the Great Qing dynasty. You're undoubtedly capable of countering this poison. Please, assist your Highness. After his plea, Hong Lian's voice came from behind the screen. Thank you, Miss Su. That voice pricked Su Yingxue like a needle. She glanced back at Emochi. He was Chu Yihan's trusted aide, and if he was this anxious about Hong Lian, could she infer that Chu Yihan held similar concerns? Chu Yihan looked at Su Yingxue, his eyes slowly losing their luster. He reached out to pull her close, but Su Yingxue pushed him away with a cold expression. Your Highness, forgive my inadequacy. I cannot assist you in this matter. Why can't you help? If you could revive Consort Xiang even after her death, how can you possibly be unable to cure this poison? Emochi's anxiety was evident. Emochi. Chu Yihan reprimanded him sharply, and Emochi immediately lowered his head in apology. Miss Su, I acted hastily, but I implore you to help. Hong Lian's eyes have been poisoned. If she can't recover, it will be greatly inconvenient. The corners of Su Yingxue's mouth curled up in a cold, mocking arc. Of course, it would be inconvenient. If Hong Lian were relieved of her condition, her and Zi Wei's lives would be in peril. Yet, Su Yingxue persisted. She looked straight at Chu Yihan, resolute and direct. Your Highness cares deeply for her. Must you assist her in detoxifying this poison? Chu Yihan furrowed his brow and contemplated for a moment before parting his lips slightly. If you can, one hope you'll do your utmost to try. Su Yingxue felt a fiery surge within her. She rose abruptly. Just like that night when I saved Xingping, as long as I have the capability, one must save her, right? Chu Yihan, what do you take me for? Am I merely a tool for you to save people? No. Chu Yihan stood up quickly and took her hand, his palm radiating warmth. I never cared if you could save someone. What matters to me is you. What is it? If I couldn't save someone if one were useless, would your Highness still treat me like this? Would he still be this kind to her? Su Yingxue's eyes brimmed with a hint of bitterness, a trace of moisture forming. Chu Yihan was about to blurt out that he would still treat her the same, but suddenly, Hong Lian interjected, Your Highness, I will take my leave to clear up the misunderstanding between you two. She rose and left from behind the screen, appearing to stumble due to her unclear vision, causing a commotion. Emochi rushed to assist her, saying, Honglian, please be careful. AI Su didn't say she wouldn't help. Your Highness was still discussing it with her. Emochi's words only deepened the hurt Su Ingxue felt. Your Highness and one were discussing saving lives, but I don't want to save them. Su Ingxue wiped her teary eyes, broke free from Chu Yihan's grasp, and fled. Su Ingxue, Chu Yihan wanted to chase after her, but Emochi shouted, Your Highness, bad news. Hong Lian's eyes. Chu Yihan furrowed his brow and went behind the screen. Hong Lian's eyes were bleeding, a horrifying sight. Chu Yihan ordered coldly, Stop her bleeding. Yes, Your Highness. Emochi was frantic as he brought medicine. However, Hong Lian refused to let him touch her and instead painstakingly wiped away the bloodstains. The handkerchief Emochi gave her was still stained with tears. Chapter 170. Fake Hong Lian revealed her vulnerable side in front of Chu Yihan. Your Highness, if I can no longer see, I'm afraid I won't be able to manage the Silver Moon Pavilion. Don't be discouraged. One will write a letter and instruct someone to find a renowned physician for you. Chu Yihan turned and pinned a letter, which he then had Emochi deliver. Emochi hurriedly handed the letter to the palace guards and rushed back. However, upon his return, he found Hong Lian kneeling beside Chu Yihan. She appeared nothing like her usual self. She spoke softly, Your Highness, what if one remained blind for the rest of my life? I won't let that happen, Chu Yihan replied coldly. His gaze didn't fall on Hong Lian, but instead lingered on the chessboard, where Su Ingxue had made a game-changing move. Unaware of this, Hong Lian persisted in her plea. Your Highness, if one can see again, you will be my savior. 111 remember you for the rest of my life. Chu Yihan held a chess piece. It felt cold to the touch, yet he sensed the warmth Su Ingxue had left behind when she touched it. Emochi reappeared and informed them that the letter had been sent. Chu Yihan seemed to awaken from his thoughts. He held the chess piece in his hand, stood up, and spoke with a chilly tone. You don't have to do this. One saved you because of him. It has nothing to do with you. Su Ingxue has chosen not to help you, and that's her prerogative. Chu Yihan's words extinguished the glimmer of joy in Hong Lian's heart. She bit her lip, her tone filled with frustration. Yes, Your Highness. As Chu Yihan departed, Hong Lian suddenly panicked and shouted, Your Highness, can you stay and talk to Hong Lian a bit longer? Your Highness. She reached out as if trying to grasp something, but there was nothing there. Seeing her nearly stumble, Emochi extended his hand to support her. She grabbed onto his arm, her face lighting up with joy. Your Highness, you've returned. Your Highness has gone far away, Emochi sighed. Hong Lian's expression instantly turned cold and unreceptive. She released her grip on Emochi's hand and walked forward instinctively. Emochi glanced at his handkerchief, which he had just used to wipe away the bloodstains from Hong Lian. However, it wasn't her blood at all. Emochi couldn't help but warn her, Hong Lian, don't waste your efforts in front of Your Highness. Hong Lian clung to the screen, her sharp nails piercing the exquisite red sandalwood. What do you mean? Emochi tucked the handkerchief into his chest. Your Highness has already made it abundantly clear. If he discovers this handkerchief, you can forget about seeing him again in this lifetime. Do you dare to give the handkerchief to Your Highness? Hong Lian's tone carried a potent threat. Emochi chuckled. Why wouldn't one dare? He simply refused to do it, because if he did, she would be heartbroken, angry, and miserable for the rest of her life. Hong Lian was furious, but Emochi was someone close to Chu Yihan. She couldn't harm him, so she suppressed her anger and tried to please him. Emochi, one implore you, please don't tell Your Highness. I can choose not to tell Your Highness, but I have a condition. Tell me, Hong Lian said calmly. As long as it didn't tarnish her image in Chu Yihan's eyes, she was willing to do anything. Could you try to like me? Chu Jinling wasn't partaking in this display of affection. When he emerged, he ran into Lin Cece, who was idly browsing in front of the bookshelves. Chapter 171. Great God Chu Jinling. The moment Lin Cixi walked in, Su Yingxue rushed out. Lin Cixi greeted her, but Su Yingxue ignored her. Chu Jinling noticed Lin Cixi standing there in confusion and kindly stepped in to help smooth things over for Su Yingxue. Miss Lin, Dr. Su had some urgent matters today, which is why she left in a hurry. I see. Lin Cixi nodded. I was wondering why she ignored me. Oh, Ninth Prince, what brings you here? As the daughter of a prominent military family, Lin Cixi had some knowledge of royalty. Compared to her scoundrel of a brother, Chu Xiuwen, and the haughty Chu Chengye, she found Chu Jinling, who seemed to idle around all day, more endearing. Chu Jinling had a penchant for smiling, and when he did, it was like a breath of fresh air. I own this bookstore. As the proprietor, it's only natural for me to visit regularly. Proprietor? Lin Cixi's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. I never expected you to own a bookstore. Miss Lin, are you underestimating me? I set up this entire bookstore, and each book was handpicked by me. Chu Jinling crossed his arms, appearing rather self-satisfied, as if to say, see, I have my talents. The bookstore is quite nice, but there aren't enough books. I searched for a long time and couldn't find what one wanted to read. Lin Cixi sighed softly. Since she didn't have anything in her hand, she subconsciously reached for her whip. However, she felt empty-handed. The whip had been given to Su Yingxue. Too few books? Miss Lin, are you joking? This bookstore of mine is among the best in Jiangdu City, featuring 3 floors of bookshelves. How could you not find the books you want? Chu Jinling couldn't stand others saying this. What? There are more upstairs? Lin Cixi was genuinely surprised. Silly girl, come on. Let me take you upstairs to find your books. Chu Jinling playfully tapped Lin Cixi's head and led her to the 2nd floor. Lin Cixi wanted to find military books to read, so Chu Jinling took her to a corner on the 2nd floor, set up a ladder, and fetched a stack of military books for her. Wow, what kind of military book is this? I've never seen it before. And these? Peerless God of War, Beacon Fighters. What are these? How come I've never heard of them before? Lin Cixi flipped through the book in her hand, treating it like a precious treasure. These are all God of War novels. I adapted them based on my imperial uncle's battlefield exploits. I've written his military techniques into these books, but I've presented them as stories to make them more engaging and lively. Since you like military books, you can choose from this category. Chu Jinling proudly raised an eyebrow, anticipating Lin Cixi's compliments. Lin Cixi didn't disappoint. Her large, sparkling eyes were filled with stars. Ninth Prince, you're amazing. I've never seen anyone turn military tactics into storybooks like this. And there are so many of them. A whole 10 volumes. Ah, what's so great about it? I've been gossiping since the age of 10 and started writing books at 14. So far, I've only written a few hundred. Chu Jinling pulled out a folding fan from his waist and waved it with an air of elegance. Incredible. I think you're much more impressive than your brothers. Lin Cixi's admiration was heartfelt. With the author himself by her side, Lin Cixi pulled Chu Jinling into reading with her. When they reached exciting parts, she even engaged in discussions with him. It was rare for Chu Jinling to encounter someone who admired him so much. The more they talked, the happier he became. As their conversation deepened, he suddenly noticed that Lin Cixi's eyes were exceptionally captivating. Especially when she looked at him, her eyes shone, as if they held all the stars in the sky. Chapter 172. Is Miss Smith jealous? When Su Yingxue returned to the clinic, the more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She saw a few patients, but she couldn't quell the bitterness in her heart. She decided to head to the study in the backyard to read some medical books and calm down, but she sensed a hint of danger in the air. Without hesitation, she kicked the door open and found Ziwei facing off against several individuals inside. Su Yingxue widened her eyes. Honglian, what do you think you're doing? Several black-clad assassins immediately closed in on her, forming a protective circle around Honglian. Honglian sneered. Naturally, we're here to reclaim what belongs to our Silver Moon Pavilion. You're dreaming. This is my clinic, and there's nothing here that belongs to your Silver Moon Pavilion. Get out. Su Yingxue shouted angrily. Honorable Miss Su, genius Dr. Su, why so much anger? Could it be that you're jealous of the favor your highness shows me? Hong Lian's lips curled with pride. It wasn't pride in her role as the Silver Moon Pavilion's leader, but rather pride in her victory in their previous encounter. Su Yingxue, aware that Hong Lian couldn't see, adjusted her breathing and chuckled. Hong Lian, before one poisoned you, I never imagined that the poison would not only narrow your eyes but also thicken your skin. Su Yingxue, do you think that your quick tongue can change the fact that your highness treats me well? Hong Lian's voice dripped with disdain. Why should one bother changing something that doesn't concern me? If he truly treats you well, then why are you still blind? Su Yingxue had an innate talent for provoking people. The stupidity of her past life had given way to sharp wit in this one. Her motto was simple. If someone didn't bother her, she wouldn't bother them. But if someone crossed her, Hong Lian's anger flared, and she waved her hand, ordering, "Find it. If you can't, take all the books from here." Are you looking for my mother's diary? No need. I didn't put it here. Where I've hidden it, you'll never find it, Su Yingxue said, crossing her arms. It's either in this clinic or the Marquis Manor. Su Yingxue, do you think I wouldn't dare to enter the Marquis Manor? Hong Lian gritted her teeth. She had led the Silver Moon Pavilion for so long, and nobody had dared to be so audacious in front of her. If you want to enter the Marquis Manor, one can take you there. But even if one gave you a month, you wouldn't find my mother's diary, even if you dug 3 feet into the Marquis Manor. Su Yingxue informed her calmly that she was the only one who could enter the Medicine King's Valley within her consciousness. Not to mention digging 3 feet into the Marquis Manor. Even if Hong Lian dug 3 feet into the entire Great Qing dynasty, she still wouldn't find it. Su Yingxue, just you wait. The day one regain my sight will be the day of your death. Hong Lian left those words behind and departed under the guard of her assassins. Su Yingxue's heart sank slightly. Hong Lian's words posed no real threat to her, but they served as a reminder. With Hong Lian's skills, she could always find someone to cure the poison. However, during the time she had been blind, she wouldn't be able to oversee every aspect of the Silver Moon Pavilion. She could infiltrate the Silver Moon Pavilion once more. Once inside the Silver Moon Pavilion, she would discover who exactly had come to trade and by her mother's handwritten letter. Ziwei, Su Yingxue called softly, and the shadowy figure immediately moved to her side. Su Yingxue winked at him. Tonight, we're going to the Silver Moon Pavilion. Ziwei nodded. After night fell, Su Yingxue donned a black robe that blended seamlessly with the night. Just like Ziwei, under his guidance, they infiltrated the Silver Moon Pavilion. The terrain was complex, and security was tight. Su Yingxue had to remain vigilant for any poison traps in the security. After all, the Silver Moon Pavilion's trade network was extensive, and all kinds of poisons could be traded here. Their defenses might also employ these tactics. Chapter 173. Trap Ziwei had been living in the Silver Moon Pavilion for many years, so he was well acquainted with its layout. He led Su Yingxue into the Central Academy, where all the transaction records were stored. Su Yingxue gazed at the tightly sealed door and mused that the Silver Moon Pavilion was no different from other places. The guards could be easily evaded, and even this pavilion lacked any distinctive features. It was somewhat different from what she had imagined. As she took her first step, Ziwei suddenly grasped her hand. "We've fallen into a trap." His deep and hoarse voice resonated with a sense of impending danger. Before he could protect Su Yingxue within his embrace, the courtyard echoed with the sound of arrows. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. These were thick, heavily weighted arrows, 10 times more lethal than those crafted within the imperial palace. Su Yingxue widened her eyes in astonishment. Indeed, there's quite a difference. She had underestimated the situation. By the time she snapped out of it, Hong Lian and several assassins were already perched on the rafters. Hong Lian scolded sternly, "Who dares to trespass into my Silver Moon Pavilion?" Su Yingxue raised an eyebrow. "Are you genuinely blind, or are you pretending?" Hong Lian had been in her study during daylight hours and now appeared before her. Su Yingxue didn't doubt that tonight was a trap set by Hong Lian to ensnare her, and she had fallen right into it. Miss Su, we have no grudges between us. Even if you're unwilling to treat me, why barge into my Silver Moon Pavilion and disrupt my rules? Hong Lian proclaimed with a tone of magnanimity. Su Yingxue sneered. Pavilion Master Hong Lian, are you genuinely asking this question? She forcefully seized her mother's diary, raised a lion to harm her, and even intruded into her study. And now, they were saying she disrupted their rules? My Silver Moon Pavilion has always conducted itself by the rules. But I apologize, Miss Su. Tonight you and number 1 must stay. Hong Lian raised her hand, formed a fist, and her assassins descended. Su Yingxue was protected by Ziwei behind her. When she saw him rush out recklessly, her heart tightened. She had been careless. The assassins below, when working together, were challenging for Ziwei to handle alone, despite his superiority in one-on-one combat. However, Ziwei had been an assassin for many years and understood one thing very well. That was captured the leader first. By capturing Hong Lian, he and Su Yingxue might escape this intricate trap unscathed. Ziwei inflicted injuries upon the others, preventing them from being able to concentrate. He then leaped into the air and thrust his sword toward Hong Lian. Although Hong Lian possessed formidable martial arts skills, her blindness meant that after exchanging only a couple of moves with Ziwei, her arm was pierced by his blade. Hong Lian tumbled heavily. Just as Ziwei was about to seize her, he sensed a swift, cold gleam stabbing towards him. Despite his years of combat experience and exceptional speed, this sword arrived at an astonishing pace. He narrowly avoided a fatal strike, but couldn't evade the second sword. Puqi, the Qingfeng sword, pierced his abdomen. He attempted to counterattack, but suffered a forceful palm strike. His flexible sword shattered under Chu Yuhan's palm force, its sharp fragments slashing across his body. A surge of potent internal energy sent him hurtling from the rafter. Su Yingxue watched him land and rushed to assist him. Ziwei, get out of the way. To avoid injuring her, Ziwei managed his force and flew to the opposite side. Su Yingxue merely stumbled, but he collided with the wall. The arrow that had previously fallen on the wall embedded itself into his body, causing intense pain. Puff! Ziwei expelled several mouthfuls of blood. He raised his head, his gaze filled with concern as he looked at Su Yingxue. Be careful. He pointed his sword at Ziwei. Since everything originated from him, once he's gone, you and the Silver Moon Pavilion will have no further obligations to each other. Your Highness, Miss Su and number 1 have been together for so long. It's likely she has some feelings for him. Miss Su even named him Ziwei. It seems she's quite fond of him, Hong Lian sighed softly. She seemed to mention the naming matter casually, but it struck the chord that Chu Yihan cared about the most. He couldn't tolerate the person he cared about holding another in her heart. Step aside, Chu Yihan barked. His eyes reddened. Seeing Su Yingxue holding the hand of this man, he couldn't suppress his killing intent. Chapter 175. This king completes the deal for her, step aside. This sentence was spoken by Ziwei as he held Su Yingxue's hand. His breath was weak, his voice hoarse. Saying this inflicted even more pain on Su Yingxue's heart. She held Ziwei firmly and turned to face Chu Yihan. Her exquisite eyes were filled with determination. One won't let you. You can't kill him, unless you kill me first. What did you just say? Chu Yihan's hand holding the sword trembled, and a hint of pain was hidden in his icy eyes. Did she care about him so much? What if I insist on killing him? Chu Yihan's eyes turned red, and his intent to kill grew stronger. I won't let this happen. Su Yingxue pronounced each word. She opened her arms, shielding herself behind them, using her body to confront Chu Yihan's blade. If he had persisted in striking her with the sword, she wouldn't have dodged. You, go. Ziwei covered his wound. His voice strained and managed to utter 2 words. Su Yingxue didn't look back at him but firmly stated, I'm your master, and I'll protect you. If she couldn't even protect him, then what was the point of snatching him away from the Silver Moon Pavilion? Moonlight bathed the ground in a pale white glow. Chu Yihan's gaze was colder than the moonlight. He sheathed his sword and turned to Hong Lian. Let them go. Hong Lian smiled faintly. Yes, your highness. Hong Lian waved her hand. Clear the way for Miss Su and number 1. The assassins surrounding them immediately dispersed. Su Yingxue and Ziwei were no longer a threat. Su Yingxue carried Ziwei on her shoulder and walked away with him. She didn't even glance back at Chu Yihan. Hong Lian quietly followed Chu Yihan's footsteps. She was familiar with every corner of the Silver Moon Pavilion, but she nearly stumbled on the steps. Chu Yihan helped her up. Feeling the strength of his arm, Hong Lian stood up shyly and softly said, "Thank you, your highness." "No need." Chu Yihan withdrew his hand coldly. "What do you plan to do about her deal with the Silver Moon Pavilion?" Chu Yihan's eyes were as icy as ever. Hong Lian had already prepared an excuse. She wanted Chu Yihan to owe her a favor, so she said, "Hong Lian knows that your highness cares about Miss Su." Miss Su took number 1 away. According to the Silver Moon Pavilion's rules, neither of them can be spared. But considering your highness' feelings, I will complete her trade. Before she could finish, Chu Yihan interrupted her. Hong Lian's expression froze. Chu Yihan wanted to complete the trade for Su Yingxue. He knew the Silver Moon Pavilion's rules very well. Hong Lian's lips trembled. "Your highness, this trade is no small matter. If your highness wants to personally complete it, that would inevitably require a much heavier price." She couldn't bear it. She couldn't bear it. "I have already said it. I will complete this trade. From now on, Su Yingxue will owe nothing to the Silver Moon Pavilion." Chu Yihan left immediately after saying this. Hong Lian chased after him, her face pale. "Your highness, please don't. Don't go. Your highness." All. Before, she wanted Chu Yihan to assist her, but this time, she tumbled down the stairs. She lay on the ground, half of her sharp nails broken, and her fingers bleeding. She gazed into the air and murmured, "Your highness, why? Is Su Yingxue that exceptional? Is she worth any heavy price?" Su Yingxue brought Ziwei back to the clinic and tended to his wounds. Then, she immediately went to prepare medicine for him. Chapter 176. The person who chased after you when he applied the medicine, he was like a controlled piece of wood. He did whatever Su Yingxue told him to do. However, when Su Yingxue brought the medicine in front of him, his face was expressionless. He did not move or open his mouth. "Do you want to drink it? If not, I'll make you drink it." Su Yingxue, with a worried expression, urged him. Ziwei continued to remain silent. Su Yingxue became so anxious that tears welled up in her eyes. Seeing this, Ziwei pointed towards her waist. Following his gesture, Su Yingxue retrieved a bag of candies from her belt. It was the same candy she had fed him last time. She bit her lip and chuckled softly. "You're still thinking about candy, huh?" The purple hue at the corners of Ziwei's eyes deepened, and the radiance it emitted grew colder. However, his eyes held warmth, especially when Su Yingxue presented the candy. Su Yingxue picked up the broken candies from the paper bag. All of them were shattered, with not a single intact piece left. She pursed her lips and negotiated with Ziwei. "How about you drink the medicine first, and I promise to buy you candy first thing tomorrow morning?" "No." Ziwei firmly fixed his gaze on the candy. Su Yingxue glanced at the sky. It was already past curfew, and all the shops were closed. She wouldn't be able to buy candy at this hour. But she couldn't possibly let him avoid taking his medicine just because there was no candy, right? Su Yingxue set the broken candies aside and held the medicine, coaxing him gently. "First, drink your medicine. I promise 111 get you candy as soon as the sun rises tomorrow." As she spoke, Ziwei had already picked up the half-broken bag of candy and put it into his mouth. Then, he drank the medicine from her hand. Su Yingxue didn't know what to say, but the fact that he was now willing to take his medicine, without her resorting to trickery or needle injections, was a significant change. However, the wounds on his body, including the one inflicted by Chu Yihan, still made her feel guilty. Su Yingxue sat by the bedside, organizing the events of tonight in her mind. It was true that she had fallen into Hong Lian's trap, and Chu Yahan's appearance probably wasn't as coincidental as it seemed. Moreover, Chu Yahan's words suggested that he had known Ziwei had been with her all along, and Ziwei had been injured throughout. During the spring banquet, she noticed that Mo Qi was also severely injured. She suddenly asked Ziwei, "Are the people who have been pursuing you from the Ninth Prince's mansion?" Ziwei nodded.
Yes.
Su Yingxi's heart was instantly flooded with mixed emotions. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ziwei lowered his gaze and with a hoarse voice replied, "One didn't want to bother you." This statement hit Su Yingxi's heart like a punch. She felt remorseful towards him. She reached out to poke Ziwei's face and gently said, "You must not hide such things from me in the future. I am your master, understand?" Ziwei had heard many orders from his master, but they were always cold and domineering. However, only Su Yingxue gave him orders with such tenderness. Ziwei obediently nodded. "I will never hide anything from you in the future. I will faithfully protect you." Su Yingxue stayed by Ziwei's side throughout the night. She only relaxed when she saw that his wounds weren't inflamed. However, she knew that Ziwei wasn't one to take proper care of himself. She applied a sleeping draught to the silver needles and administered a few injections to ensure he slept soundly. She then instructed Manager Qi to feed him medicine and meals regularly. This was the only way she could prevent him from moving too much and disturbing his wounds. After a night of hard work, Manager Qi noticed that Su Yingxue looked exhausted and had the lingering scent of blood on her. He didn't dare to inquire about what had happened but expressed concern. "Miss, how about taking a break from your duties as a doctor today? Rest for the day." Chapter 177. Chu Chengye came to look for her. Su Yingxue glanced at the many patients waiting in line in the lobby and waved her hand. "No need. They'll go change, and then you can let the patients in." Sigh. Manager Qi sighed. Su Yingxi's personality was so stubborn that no one could persuade her. Su Yingxue went to change into a clean set of clothes and sat in the treatment room. After seeing a few patients, she was a little tired. Manager Qi carefully distributed the patients to the other doctors and allowed Su Yingxue to rest in the treatment room for a while. However, a person suddenly walked in and headed straight for Su Yingxi's treatment room. Manager Qi quickly stopped him. "Hello, Dr. Su is resting. Please go to the other doctors." "I'm not here to see a doctor." Chu Chengye was extraordinarily handsome, carrying the noble aura of a prince from the royal family. As soon as he appeared, Manager Qi couldn't stop him. Su Yingxue had just taken a brief rest at the table when Chu Chengye walked in. Upon seeing the exhaustion on her face, he had initially intended to scold her, but now he felt a pang of sympathy. He instinctively reached out to hold Su Yingxi's hand. However, Su Yingxue woke up in reflex. Her eyes widened suddenly. After seeing Chu Chengye's face clearly, her beautiful face carried a hint of mockery. "Seventh Prince, you've graced us with your presence. What terminal illness have you contracted?" "Su Yingxue, is this how you speak to me?" Chu Chengye's temper wasn't bad, but whenever he saw Su Yingxue, she would easily provoke him. "I can't give you the attitude that your highness wants, but someone else will." Su Yingxue stood up and rubbed her sore temples. She pointed at Chu Chengye's back and said, "The door is there, your highness. Take care." She couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. "Su Yingxue, I'm here today to inform you to go to the prince's mansion and treat my third brother. You must cure my third brother." Chu Chengye's good temper was gone after being chased away by her. He was only left with gritted teeth and a hot-blooded desire to conquer Su Yingxue. "Why?" Su Yingxue raised her eyebrows. "Seventh Prince, do you think that I, Su Yingxue, am a pushover? Let you do whatever you want?" "I don't think so. As long as you can cure third brother, I can put in a good word for you in front of my mother. When the old general returns to court and mentions our marriage, my mother will not disagree," Chu Chengye argued. Su Yingxue was speechless. "You're still thinking about marriage?" Su Yingxue thought. Su Yingxi's face was cold. Unfortunately, she was no longer the Su Yingxue from her previous life. "Your Highness, the engagement between you and me was just a joke. My grandfather might have already forgotten about this matter. There's no need to trouble him to enter the palace again, Su Yingxue said impatiently. She was about to walk out of the treatment room when Chu Qingye grabbed her hand and pulled her into his arms. Do you hate me so much? Su Yingxue, have you had a change of heart? You've fallen in love with the 9th imperial uncle, haven't you? Chu Qingye, don't spout nonsense. Su Yingxue kicked him away, and her face flushed red. Am I right? Chu Qingye's lips curled into a sneer. The 9th imperial uncle has always been arrogant and condescending, but you can touch his Qingfeng sword? Su Yingxue, one think you've been colluding with each other for a long time. Pa. Su Yingxue gave him a tight slap. Chu Qingye, if you say one more word, we'll make sure you won't be able to leave the clinic. She had been holding the poison in her hand for a long time. Chapter 178. Su Yuro and her daughter's vicious plan. How will you stop me from leaving? Chu Qingye was trying to provoke her. He knew he wouldn't lose to her in a fight. However, he didn't expect Su Yingxue to sprinkle white powder on him and then stab him with 3 needles. His entire body felt as if it was being bitten by thousands of snakes and insects. All. Su Yingxue, how dare you? Chu Qingye was in so much pain that a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Su Yingxue then stabbed him with 3 needles again. This time, she intended to make Chu Qingye's suffering even more intense. Chu Qingye's face turned pale. He gritted his teeth and shouted, Su Yingxue, stop! With a swift motion, Su Yingxue withdrew the silver needles. While Chu Qingye's pain subsided, his eyes were still filled with fear. Su Yingxue shouted coldly, Get lost. He clutched his chest and left with great difficulty. However, he couldn't resist turning around and telling Su Yingxue, the engagement between you and me will never be voided. Su Yingxue snorted coldly. She didn't care. She only cared about his words. You've long fallen in love with the 9th imperial uncle, haven't you? These words were like a strong net that wrapped around her heart, tightening it, and causing her to feel suffocated and in pain. The news of Chu Qingye leaving the clinic in a sorry state quickly spread through the streets. Su Yingxue and Tongchang Medical Center had their share of popularity. Plus, with Su Yuro's curiosity, this news reached her ears in no time. She swung her hand and shattered a white jade teacup. 2 tears rolled down from her eyelashes. Her eyes were filled with hatred and reluctance. This bitch. Not only did she seduce the 9th prince, but she also managed to capture your highness. How could your highness fall for that woman and her schemes? On the other hand, Lu Shulan remained much calmer compared to her. She held the golden thread in her hand and played with the incense powder in the incense burner. She smiled coldly and said, As long as they're men, they'll all cheat sooner or later. When they're used to women admiring them, they'll start yearning for what they can't have. Su Yuro pursed her lips and twisted the handkerchief in her hand when she heard this. Lu Shulan took her hand and patted it gently. Ruer, think about it. Hasn't it always been like this? Su Yingxue used to idolize him, and your subtle displays of affection towards him made him focus on you. Now, Su Yingxue has simply used your tactics against you. Su Yuro gritted her teeth, her eyes welling up with tears. So what can I do? Can I have another chance? Now, the 7th prince's heart is completely in her hands. During the spring banquet, your highness looked at me far less than he did at her. He even went to look for her today. She felt too embarrassed to admit to Lu Shulan that Chu Qingye hadn't visited her in a long time. She was in a state of panic. Lu Shulan held her hand and reassured her not to worry. Su Yuro was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Now, Su Yingxue is the center of attention in the entire Jiangdu city. She has gained recognition in front of the emperor. How can one not be anxious? Mother, help me. Please help me. She pulled Lu Shuyan's hand and acted coquettish. For so many years, every time her mother taught her, she would make sure Su Yingxue suffered a lot and held her accountable. Now, as long as her mother was around, Su Yingxue would not have it easy. I will teach you a method that will cause trouble for Su Yingxue. When something happens to her, you can deal with her slowly, Lu Shulan said, and her eyes were wrapped in layers of schemes. After hearing her mother's words, Su Yuro left immediately for the minister's estate. Wu Ruofai's legs hadn't fully recovered yet. She refused to take her medicine or eat. She couldn't afford to fall or bump into anything. She caused a commotion in her room all day long. Wu Hongtao, who had initially pitied her, occasionally came to check on her injuries. Chapter 179. Wu Ruofei is staying at the clinic. Seeing her in such a shrewish state, he couldn't be bothered to come again. He was in a precarious situation, and with Madame Wu's recent embarrassing incident, his two sons were becoming more and more disappointed. It was driving him to the brink of frustration. When Su Yuro arrived, Wu Ruofei was crying and refusing to eat. Feng He held the food, trembling beside her. "Miss, please don't harm your health. You should eat a little." "I want to eat. I want." "It's all your fault, you servants. How could my mother do something like that?" "My mother wouldn't. And my brothers. Oh, they're supposed to be so capable." "Feng He, come over here." Wu Ruofei shouted like a madwoman. Feng He was trembling, every step filled with fear. She knew that when Wu Ruofei opened her mouth, she intended to bite someone again. Ever since her limbs were broken and she couldn't move, her way of venting her anger had become biting people. All the maids in the room had been bitten, their bodies covered in bruises. Just yesterday, in a fit of rage, she had bitten off half of a young girl's ear. That girl was only 13 years old, and her appearance was now permanently marred. Feng He had served Wu Ruofei for many years, prodding her temper countless times. But now that Wu Ruofei's anger was directed at her, she was terrified. "Are you dead? You're walking so slowly. Hurry up and come over." Wu Ruofei glared at her and roared. Feng He closed her eyes and began to tremble before she even reached Wu Ruofei. As she got closer, Wu Ruofei opened her mouth and viciously bit into Feng He's arm. "Oh, miss, please be gentle." Feng He cried out in pain. It was hurt. "Oh, oh." Wu Ruofei used all her strength to bite Feng He's arm until it bled. "All right, get lost." Feng He wiped away her tears and left, only to run into Su Yuro. Su Yuro had been quietly observing from outside the door for a while. When she saw Wu Ruofei in such a state, she wiped the gloating expression from her face and greeted her with a gentle and compassionate demeanor. Initially, Wu Ruofei didn't respond to her kindness, but when Su Yuro mentioned having a way to deal with Su Yingxue, Wu Ruofei's eyes lit up. After hearing Su Yuro's words, she snorted coldly. "Why should one beg Su Yingxue? Even if she kneels in front of me, one won't let her treat me." "Ruofei, don't you want to get better as soon as possible? If an ordinary doctor treats you, you'll have to stay in bed for at least another month. But I've heard that Su Yingxue's treatment for muscle and bone injuries is miraculous. If she heals you, won't you be able to stand up much sooner? By then, you won't have to worry about not being able to deal with her." Upon hearing the possibility of teaching Su Yingxue a lesson, Wu Ruofei's eyes started turning red. "I want to get better as soon as possible. I want to avenge my mother and my brothers." "That's the right attitude. Minister Wu doesn't have time to attend to you now. Tomorrow, have someone carry you to Su Yingxue's clinic. Her clinic has recently opened a patient ward. You can stay there for easy observation." "Brother Hao." When Su Hao was mentioned, Wu Ruofei's excitement grew. She had made up her mind. Even if Su Yingxue refused to accept her, she would stay at her clinic. The following day, she had people carry her to the clinic in a grand procession. Su Yuro was concerned that she might inadvertently reveal something, so she even prepared a script for her to remember. If Su Yingxue rejected her and refused to treat her, she would create a scene at the clinic to tarnish her reputation. Chapter 180. 10,000 Su Yuro stood nearby, watching as Wu Ruofei was carried into the clinic. A trace of cruelty flickered in her eyes. "Su Yingxue, even if you refuse to accept Wu Ruofei this time, you will still suffer consequences." Su Yuro muttered. Wu Ruofei was brought into the clinic and explicitly requested that Su Yingxue treat her. Manager Chi had an exceptional memory, so how could he forget her previous conflicts with Su Yingxue? He quickly put on a smile and said, "Miss, our Dr. Su is currently occupied. You'll need to wait for a few hours. Why don't we have another doctor attend to you? Dr. Du, here, is particularly skilled at treating muscle and bone injuries. I'm a female patient. One can't allow a male doctor to examine me. How will one ever marry in the future? Today is the 15th day of the month. Isn't Dr. Su known for treating women? If she has many patients, 111 wait." Wu Ruofei sat in a wheelchair surrounded by 4 male servants and 4 maids, occupying a considerable space. Having attracted attention, she recited everything Su Yuro had coached her to say. Manager Chi found it quite challenging to handle the situation. He instructed his apprentice to keep an eye on Wu Ruofei, while he went to consult Su Yingxue. Su Yingxue furrowed her brow. Did Wu Ruofei say that? Yes, indeed. Miss Wu is behaving completely differently from her previous disruptive self. One had her wait outside, and she didn't even get angry. This time, it seems she came prepared, Manager Chi said, clearly worried. It was too difficult for his young miss to open this clinic. There were always people who wanted to find trouble with her. Never mind. Have someone bring her inside. They'll treat her. Su Yingxue waved her hand dismissively. But miss, what if she intends to harm you? Then he'll disable her first. Su Yingxue's eyes flashed with cold determination. If she could break Wu Ruofei's limbs once, she could break her bones twice. Wu Ruofei was carried into Su Yingxue's treatment room. With no one to rely on, she felt somewhat apprehensive about facing Su Yingxue alone. Su Yingxue exuded an icy aura when her face turned cold. She approached Wu Ruofei, who trembled in fear. What are you doing?" Su Yingxue rolled her eyes. "You came for medical treatment? So how can I treat you if one don't examine you? You. Be gentle. All. It hurts." Su Yingxue, what are you doing? Be gentler. It hurts. Father. Mother. Sob. It hurts. Su Yingxue removed all the bandages from Wu Ruofei's hands and feet, inspecting her wounds. She spoke icily. "They'll apply some medicine and put a cast on you. Go back and rest. You'll be fine in less than a month." "I'm not going back. Su Yingxue, one want to stay here and recover." Wu Ruofei cried out in pain, her voice tearful yet stubborn. "I don't have a place for recovery here." "Nonsense, you have a ward here. I'm a patient here to see a doctor, so one can stay here." Su Yingxue raised an eyebrow. "You can recover at home. How did you even know that I opened a ward here?" It had only been 3 days since she established the ward, and Wu Ruofei was already eager to move in. Such a coincidence seemed unlikely. Wu Ruofei appeared fearful of being exposed and hastily explained, "It was my father who said so. He doesn't have time to take care of me, and here. As long as it helps me recover quickly, one don't care. I want to stay in the ward." Su Yingxue sneered. "You can stay in the ward, but first, pay the consultation fee." "How much?" 10,000 taels. Su Yingxue, how can you be so heartless? Seeing a doctor and staying in a ward couldn't possibly cost 10,000 taels. Wu Ruofei gritted her teeth. "Do you want to stay or not?" Chapter 181. Care about the 9th prince? It's up to you whether you want to stay or not. If you stayed here, the clinic was responsible for your food, clothing, accommodation, transportation, and even for your recovery. Do you think I opened this clinic to run at a loss? Su Yingxue coldly admonished. She didn't believe Wu Ruofei could produce 10,000 taels to stay in her ward. However, Wu Ruofei, going against her usual demeanor, insisted, 10,000 taels it is. Il have Feng he returned to the residence to fetch the money. "You, please arrange a room for me first. I want a single room, the best available." Su Yingxue raised an eyebrow, stating, "For the best single room, it's 20,000 taels." Su Yingxue, you're raising the price on the spot. Wu Ruofei gritted her teeth in frustration. 20,000 taels. Her father's annual salary wasn't even close to that. Su Yingxue's expression remained icy. She reiterated, "Do you want to stay or not?" "I'm staying." Wu Ruofei clenched her teeth. For the sake of challenging Su Yingxue and for her beloved brother Hao, she was prepared to go bankrupt if necessary. In the afternoon, the minister's estate delivered 20,000 taels of silver. Su Yingxue instructed manager Qi to arrange a ward for Wu Ruofei and placed her in the innermost room on the third floor to prevent her from causing any problems. Manager Qi carried out the orders. In the evening, Wu Jinyin came back from work. She was temporarily staying at the clinic and heard about this from manager Qi. Since Su Yingxue was also residing there and rarely visited the Marquis Manor, they had more opportunities to converse. Observing that Su Yingxue had barely eaten, Wu Jinyin asked, "Is this all because of my sister?" Su Yingxue used her chopsticks to poke at the rice in her bowl. Abruptly, she dropped her chopsticks and replied in a subdued voice, "If you don't want to, you could return the silver to her, and she could return to the residence. However, 111, make sure to help you earn back those 20,000 taels through Thousand Jiao Pavilion." Wu Jinyin comforted her by patting her hand. She knew that Su Yingxue had invested a significant amount of silver to establish the Thousand Jiao Pavilion for her. If it weren't for the fact that both the clinic and Thousand Jiao Pavilion needed to run smoothly, Su Yingxue probably wouldn't have accommodated Wu Ruofei. Su Yingxue shook her head and confessed in a somber tone, "It's not just about the money." Wu Ruofei came prepared, but there was someone behind her pulling the strings in the shadows. "If I don't accept her, and she spreads damaging rumors about the clinic's branch, we might face endless troubles here. It's better to take her in and see what tricks she might attempt." Wu Jinyin initially worried that Su Yingxue might not see through the situation. However, after hearing her words, she felt more assured and less concerned. Still, seeing Su Yingxue's persistent furrowed brows, Wu Jinyin tentatively asked, "Do you have something else on your mind?" Su Yingxue quickly relaxed her brow, diverting her attention to eating a few mouthfuls of rice.
No.
"Really? Aren't you concerned about Weiss injuries?" Su Yingxue innocently shook her head. "One administered medicine to him. He'll recover." "Then, is it about the seventh prince?" Wu Jinyin continued to probe. Su Yingxue let out a light snort. "What's there to ponder about him?" "Then, is it the ninth prince?" When Wu Jinyin asked this question, even the air fell silent for a long time. The food in Su Yingxue's mouth suddenly lost its flavor. She chewed and swallowed it, but it felt like a lump was stuck in her throat, as uncomfortable as a stone wedged there. As she choked, her eyes welled up with tears. Wu Jinyin hastily patted her back to help her breathe. Su Yingxue drank a large gulp of water before managing to swallow the food that had caused her to choke. Seeing her in this state, Wu Jinyin sighed. "Since you care so much, why make things difficult for yourself?" "I didn't." Su Yingxue's eyes were still red, filled with determination. Chapter 182. Who your sister likes. "All right, you didn't think about ninth prince." Wu Jinyin teased her. In these past few days, Su Yingxue's tightly held emotions suddenly crumbled. Yes, she missed Chu Yihan. Since her return from the Silver Moon Pavilion, Chu Yihan hadn't appeared before her, as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Perhaps he was simply beyond reach, and nobody had the means to track his whereabouts. However, he had provided her with a sense of security, an assurance that he would be there whenever she needed him. Now that he had abruptly disappeared, she felt an overwhelming sense of unease. Observing her melancholy, Wu Jinyin, understanding her stubborn nature, refrained from further jests. She tidied up the table with Jilon and left the room. Upon returning to her chamber, Su Hao was already waiting with a handful of items. He had scoured the entire city to purchase clothes, accessories, hairpins, and cosmetics. Wu Jinyin chuckled. "If you keep buying like this, rumors will spread throughout Jiangdu City that young General Su is obsessed with cosmetics." Su Hao handed her the items, a hint of embarrassment on his face. However, he calmly responded to her previous statement, "I've never cared about what others say. One only care about you." Su Hao held her hand, his palm radiating warmth. "Jinyin." His gentle call felt like an invisible hand that had captured her heart. Wu Jinyin blushed faintly, and as Su Hao embraced her, she didn't resist. Leaning into his embrace and listening to his strong heartbeat, she felt at ease. Today, one noticed Yingxue seemed down. If you have the time, you might consider visiting her, Wu Jinyan suggested, displaying great empathy. Su Yingxue might exude strength and courage on the surface, but deep down, she remained a soft-hearted girl. Has something happened to her? Su Hao's eyes showed traces of urgency. Wu Jinyan proceeded to share all recent events with him. While they hadn't attended the spring banquet, Wu Jinyan was well informed, and Su Hao had heard a bit about it. When it came to his sister, Su Hao's chiseled brows furrowed. If Wu Ruofei intends to cause trouble and harm my sister, one won't spare her. Wu Jinyan gently caressed Su Hao's face, her eyes filled with infatuation. She loved his serious and responsible demeanor. I'm not worried that my dear sister will stir up major trouble. One believes Yingxue can handle her. However, she appears to be missing Ninth Prince. Ninth Prince? Su Hao was taken aback. He knew that Ninth Prince had shown favoritism toward his sister, likely due to their grandfather's instructions. But Su Yingxue had feelings for him. Seeing Su Hao's puzzled expression, Wu Jinyan found it amusing. You fool. Can't you see that your sister likes Ninth Prince? Chapter 183. Choosy Wu Ruofei. Wu Jinyan saw Su Hao's stunned expression and asked him, Why? Don't you approve of her being with Ninth Prince? These words made Su Hao frown slightly. This is not something one can decide. I think even grandfather can't make that decision. Everything depends on Su Yingxue's choice. But you look very worried. Wu Jinyan could discern all of Su Hao's emotions. Su Hao nodded. Ninth Prince's status is noble and unfathomable. Although my sister is different from before, she is still young. If the matter between the two of them is spread, the one who will be hurt will only be my sister. Su Hao was only worried that he hadn't given enough to his sister, whom he had doted on for more than 10 years. He didn't know how to react when he suddenly found out that there was another man who liked Su Yingxue. It was true that the person was noble and powerful enough, but as her brother, his first reaction was still unhappiness. Is that all you're worried about? Wu Jinyan teased him. Su Hao lowered his head and touched her delicate face with the tip of his nose. He admitted frankly also, I never thought that my younger sister would have someone she likes and get married in the future. I always felt that she would always be my younger sister. What about me? Wu Jinyan looked up at him. There was a significant height difference between her and Su Hao. She had to raise her head to see his handsome face. The lighting wasn't very bright, but Wu Jinyan felt that Su Hao's eyes were especially bright. When he leaned over, his hot breath carried the scent of desire, but he only kissed her gently on the forehead. Start with emotion and stop with etiquette. Su Hao kissed her and smiled. You will be my only wife. After Wu Ruofei sent someone to deliver the money, she stayed in the clinic. She was as picky as she was at home. Whenever the apprentice who changed her dressing didn't do his best, she would scold the female apprentice until she cried. Being a girl herself, she couldn't send a rude male apprentice. Manager Chi had a headache for several days. Su Yingxue had endured it for a few days. When Wu Ruofei made a fuss again, she took the tray and personally changed her dress. Get lost. Don't touch me with your dirty hands. You look lowly. Wu Ruofei shouted from the bed. The originally clean and tidy ward was now a mess. Su Yingxue's face darkened, and her voice was cold. If you continue to cause trouble, they'll throw you out right now. Wu Ruofei was shocked. When she saw Su Yingxue enter, her heart trembled violently. She hated Su Yingxue so much that she gritted her teeth and said unwillingly, What right do you have to chase me out? I've paid 20,000 taels of silver. You must cure me, or I'll go to the palace and report you. Oh. You even know what a complaint is. Your mother taught you well. Su Yingxue chuckled and observed Wu Ruofei. She blurted out, My mother didn't teach me that. Su Yingxue's eyes were sharp. Then who taught you? It's... Wu Ruofei immediately reacted and looked away. She said proudly, It's none of your business. One still have my father and brother at home. My father is still a minister. Anyway, if you can't cure me, Don't think of chasing me away so easily. Su Yingxue snorted softly. I don't have any patience that I can't cure, but the premise is that if you continue to play tricks, one have plenty of ways to deal with you. How are you going to deal with me? Wu Ruofei trembled in fear. Chapter 184. Testing her to be honest, she had been afraid of Su Yingxue for a long time. In the past, Su Yuro could still suppress her when she bullied her. Now, even her mother was in such a miserable state because of Su Yingxue. Su Yingxue's martial arts and strength were terrifying. As soon as she walked over, she broke out in a cold sweat. Naturally, it's a way to make you afraid. Su Yingxue grabbed Wu Ruofei's arm and changed her dressing. She deliberately did not use any strength to make her continue to cry and howl without worsening her injuries. Su Yingxue took the time for half an hour to change her dressing, but Wu Ruofei cried for whole hours. When Manager Qi was accompanying Su Yingxue on her ward rounds, he could still hear Wu Ruofei's hoarse voice. He could not help but say to Su Yingxue, Miss Wu is crying every day. It will affect the other patients. Moreover, I'm afraid that her injuries won't heal so quickly. What should we do? Her injuries will heal in 7 days. It won't take long. You should comfort the other patients and say that it was Wu Ruofei who caused the trouble. Su Yingxue said as she flipped through the pulse chart of the other patients. Manager Qi was shocked at first. Miss could heal her injuries so quickly. Then, he remembered that Su Yingxue was smart. Wu Ruofei's crying would affect the other patients, but after these patients were comforted by them, they would only think that Wu Ruofei was causing trouble. They could understand Su Yingxue's generosity and the helplessness of the medical center. This move was brilliant. Miss healed Miss Wu so quickly. Could it be that she discovered something? Manager Qi was rather concerned. I was testing Wu Ruofei just now. It wasn't her mother who taught her to stay in the clinic, nor was it her father. As for the person behind her, let's see what they're going to do. Su Yingxue closed the pulse chart with a snap, and a sharp glint flashed across her eyes. If Wu Ruofei wanted her to explode, Su Yingxue would explode with her. Let's see who will give themselves away in the end. After Su Yingxue applied the medicine to Wu Ruofei, she cried her heart out. It was only at night that Feng He came over quietly and comforted her softly. Miss, you've been wronged. Miss Yuro said to bear with it for now. Why don't you let her endure it? I'm about to die from Su Yingxue. It hurts. Wu Ruofei had nowhere to vent her anger, so she could only continue crying. Don't Miss want to avenge Madam and the young masters? Now that Master is busy with official business, you can only rely on yourself. Feng He kept encouraging Wu Ruofei. I must avenge my mother and brothers. One still want. I want Brother Hao. That Wu Jinyin, she was just a lowly woman. What right did she have? Chapter 185. The cunning plan succeeded. I am not leaving. My leg still hurts a little. Wait for me to stay for another 2 days. Wu Ruofei stubbornly refused. Su Yingxue touched her chin and smiled, sizing her up. Is it still hurting, or do you have ulterior motives? It's still hurting. Su Yingxue, if you chase me away, and anything happens to me, it will be your responsibility. You'd better not harbor any ill intentions. Wu Ruofei became eloquent. Su Yingxue narrowed her eyes slightly, a dangerous glint flashing from them. I'm very curious. Who taught you to speak so wisely now? What did you say? Didn't I have a brain in the past? Wu Ruofei yelled at her angrily. Su Yingxue nodded honestly. That's right. You were indeed brainless in the past. She was a kind person and couldn't bear to see others being deceived by their stupidity. Su Yingxue, you. Wu Ruofei gritted her teeth. She wanted to have a fierce argument with Su Yuro, but Su Yuro had warned her not to say too much to Su Yingxue, so she refrained. She angrily returned to her bed and ignored Su Yingxue. After Su Yingxue returned, she called Manager Qi over to ask, who has visited Wu Ruofei these days? Manager Qi looked very carefully. These days, only Miss Wu, that maid, has come. No one else has visited her. Su Yingxue pinched the space between her eyebrows. Did you send someone to follow her? Yes, but her maid has either been in the minister's estate or the medical hall. She hasn't gone anywhere else recently. Su Yingshi's frown deepened. Ziwei was still recovering from his injuries, and Manager Qi might not have found the right person. She wanted to see what tricks Wu Ruofei was up to, so she could only wait. Wu Ruofei had been unusually quiet for the past 2 days. Su Yingxue had asked Manager Qi to keep an eye on her, but unexpectedly, she fell into the room and scratched a few more wounds on her legs. After Su Yingxue ordered someone to deal with it, she didn't look at her anymore. Recently, she was also concerned about Ziwei. His body was riddled with holes. She had to drug him so that he could lie down and rest. Recently, he had become smarter. Even if she put knockout powder into the candy, he wouldn't eat it. He didn't know where he got a knife from. As a new weapon, he wanted to stay close to Su Yingxue. Su Yingxue tried to persuade him. I've been in the clinic recently, and haven't encountered any danger at all. Your body hasn't recovered yet, so rest peacefully for a few more days. Ziwal hugged the knife and stared at her without saying a word. He took a step for every step she took. However, he was still on guard against her, and she drugged him again. Su Yingxue had no choice but to bring him to the treatment room. However, there was a sudden commotion upstairs. The entire clinic heard Su Hao's roar. Why are you here? Get out. He didn't know why he suddenly felt dizzy. When he woke up, he was entangled with Wu Ruofei on the bed. There were marks of intimacy on Wu Ruofei's neck, and there were tears in the corners of her eyes. But she couldn't hide her joy. Brother Hao, you finally understand my feelings. One knew that I was in your heart. As she spoke, she was about to pounce on Su Hao. Su Hao pushed her away and retreated in fear. He retreated to the side of the table before he slowly regained his senses. Suddenly, there was a loud bang at the door. Su Hao looked up and saw Wu Jinyin standing at the door. The dowry box in her hand had fallen, and the things inside were scattered all over the ground. Her eyes were empty, and her face was pale. Chapter 186. Su Hao was framed, Yenner. It wasn't like that. Yenner, listen to me. It wasn't what you thought. Su Hao was still a little dizzy, and he stumbled in front of Wu Jinyin. He reached out to grab Wu Jinyin's hand, but Wu Jinyin suddenly retreated. Don't touch me. Her thin body trembled, and her nerves tensed up. Wu Ruofei chased after him. She hugged Su Hao and shouted with tears on her face, Brother Hao, after doing this to me, are you going to abandon me? I'm a pure and innocent girl, and I gave myself to you just like that. You can't abandon me. Sob, sob, sob. The clinic itself had a lot of people, so the commotion upstairs attracted a lot of attention. Su Hao was a young general who frequented the clinic, so most people recognized him. Wu Ruofei's crying made everyone understand what had happened. At this moment, even though Su Hao's entire body was covered in mouths, he couldn't explain himself. When Su Yingxue arrived, Su Hao had just thrown Wu Ruofei to the ground. He wanted to look for Wu Jinyin, but Wu Jinyin shouted with tears in her eyes, No, go away. Her eyes were filled with pain and anger, like a flawless white wall that had cracks. She turned around and quickly left Su Hao's sight. Su Hao wanted to chase after her, but Wu Ruofei stuck to him like a piece of plaster. Get lost. Su Hao, who had always been gentle, roared angrily. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Wu Ruofei. Brother, Su Yingxue pulled him back, hinting at him not to chase after Wu Jinyin at this time. As for Wu Ruofei on the ground, she stood up again and cried loudly, Brother Hao, you said that you would marry me. I came to the clinic for treatment just to meet you. Now, the two of us have already. Brother Hao, Ruofei loves you. Shut up. Su Hao shouted angrily with red eyes. If she wasn't a woman, he definitely wouldn't hold back his temper. If you loved my brother, would you let him make a fool of himself in public? Su Yingxue pulled back the agitated Su Hao and questioned Wu Ruofei with raised eyebrows. Wu Ruofei knew that she was not eloquent enough to talk Su Yingxue out of it, so she did not continue. After a while, the commotion downstairs became louder. Su Dingheng and Wu Hongtao rushed over. When Su Dingheng saw that Su Hao and Wu Ruofei's clothes were disheveled, he looked at Su Hao seriously. Hao, What exactly did you do to Miss Wu? Su Hao's face darkened. I didn't do anything. You. Nonsense. You took advantage of my daughter, and now you're turning your back on me. When Wu Hongtao saw this scene, he was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. He immediately pulled Wu Ruofei behind him and reprimanded her. I told you not to provoke them. Why didn't you listen? Now that something has happened. Father, Wu Ruofei sobbed softly. Although she had succeeded, Wu Hongtao's anger still scared her. Su Yingxue saw the expressions of the father and daughter. However, she found it strange. Why did Su Dingheng and Wu Hongtao come so quickly? Especially Su Dingheng. He reprimanded Su Hao and apologized to Wu Hongtao while beating his chest and stomping his feet. Lord Wu, it was my fault for not being strict and disciplining my son. But don't worry, our Marquis Manor will take responsibility for your daughter. I will let Howard marry her and become the young madam of the Marquis Manor. Humph! Wu Hongtao snorted in disdain. Especially when his eyes met Su Yingxue's, he gritted his teeth in hatred. Chapter 187. Don't have to accept your fate so quickly. I'm not marrying her. Father, nothing happened between us. Su Hao regained his composure and remembered that his momentary trance was due to the illusion he had seen. Bastard! Is this how father usually teaches you? A dignified 7-foot-tall man dared to do it, but didn't dare to admit it. What do you think of Lord Wu's daughter? Su Dingheng harshly criticized Su Hao, showing no concern for Su Hao's grievances. I didn't. This matter was very suspicious. Someone must have framed me. Su Hao argued with a red face. For so many years, he had grown up with his grandfather, with little emotional connection to his father. He didn't ask his father to make decisions for him, but he wouldn't easily give in. Would Miss Wu use her innocence to slander you? Su Dingheng didn't side with Su Hao at all. With just a few words, he painted Su Hao as a heartless person. Sob, sob, sob. Father, what should one do in the future? Wu Ruofei cried innocently, leaning against Wu Hongtao. Wu Hongtao lost his temper and declared that he would report Su Hao to the authorities for mistreating his daughter. No. Su Yingxue stepped in to stop him. She glared at Wu Hongtao with a cold face. Lord Wu, do you want me to accompany you to the capital prefecture? You. Wu Hongtao felt as if someone had grabbed his throat and immediately shrunk into submission. Su Yingxue, who are you to speak here? Your brother did something foolish, and as his sister, you didn't even know how to persuade him. 111 discipline both of you. Come back with me. Su Dingheng stormed off with both of them. After returning to the Marquis Manor, Su Dingheng immediately sought to confirm the marriage between Su Hao and Wu Ruofei. Su Hao adamantly refused, which infuriated Su Dingheng. He couldn't care less about Su Yingxue. He didn't expect Su Hao to completely disregard him. He wanted to use whip on Su Hao, but given Su Hao's current status, he couldn't easily resort to physical punishment. Frustrated, Su Dingheng paced around the hall. Finally, he yelled at Su Yingxue and Su Hao, both of you, go to the ancestral hall and kneel for reflection. Su Hao and Su Yingxue stood up together. As Su Hao turned around, Su Dingheng's reminder echoed like a warning bell in his ears. However, today's events are widely known throughout the city. After all, the Wu family is one of the 6 ministers. You must marry his daughter. Su Hao's back chilled as if he hadn't heard Su Dingheng's words at all. In the ancestral hall, Su Yingxue knelt beside him. When they were alone, she gave him a meaningful look. Brother, extend your hand. Su Hao removed his wristband and extended his hand. After checking his pulse, Su Yingxue frowned. It's rosemary. What is that? Chapter 188. Threatening the Wu family, she would make her enemies pay the price. However, she had become her enemy and even hurt her family. She was determined to break his bones. How could Su Hao not know that he had been set up? However, He thought of Wu Jinyan's disappointment and how big the matter between him and Wu Ruofei had become. If he did not take responsibility for Wu Ruofei, it would not only affect himself, but also the reputation of the Marquis Manor and his grandfather's illustrious reputation. Even Su Yingshi's clinic would inevitably be criticized. "Brother, don't be so discouraged," Su Yingxue comforted Su Hao. Su Hao knelt straight, but his eyes were closed, locking the pain in his eyes. "You don't have to comfort me. If one let Yen'er down, I won't be at ease for the rest of my life. But now that you've only encountered a little setback, are you going to give up?" Wu Jinyan's voice came from behind. Su Hao suddenly turned around. "Yen'er." Wu Jinyan jogged to his side, hugged him, and explained in a low voice. "I left before so that your reputation wouldn't be damaged, but that doesn't mean that one don't believe you. Yen'er, you believe me." Su Hao's eyes shone with brilliance, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. Su Yingxue saw Jilan at the door and quietly retreated, leaving the ancestral hall for them. But she couldn't go too far either. Wu Jinyan had secretly entered the Marquis Manor. She had to ensure that she returned safely. Standing outside the door and listening to the pitter-patter of the rain on the roof, Su Yingxue thought with a cold expression. Who was the mastermind behind this? Madame Wu? Ever since she made a fool of herself at the spring banquet, Wu Hongtao had chased her back to her mother's home, so she could not keep in touch with Wu Ruofei at the minister's estate. As for Wu Hongtao, he was afraid that she still had his account book in her hands. He knew that if he angered her, she would not let him off. It couldn't be him. There weren't many young ladies who were on good terms with Wu Ruofei, and Su Yuro was one of them. Su Yingxue suddenly raised her head. She had forgotten that this younger sister of hers had not appeared much recently. In the ancestral hall, Wu Jinyan's heart ached for Su Hao's punishment, but Su Hao didn't care. He held Wu Jinyan's hands in his arms and said softly, "As long as you believe me, I don't care what others think. Yes, the worst outcome is that you marry her." Wu Jinyan's eyes dimmed. She didn't dare to imagine that Su Hao would only marry her in his entire life. But Wu Ruofei was a nightmare that she couldn't break free from. However, if she really couldn't break free, she wouldn't give up on Su Hao. "Yen'er, in my heart, only you are my wife." Even if there was nothing I could do this time, I will only marry you. Su Hao placed her hand on his chest, letting her feel how warm his heart was. Wu Jinyan lowered her head and gently planted a kiss on the back of his hand. Su Yingxue sent Jilan to secretly send Wu Jinyan back to the clinic and told her to be careful during this period to prevent others from harming her. After Wu Jinyan left, Su Yingxue wanted to make a trip to the minister's estate. Ziwal followed behind her, and the two of them quietly sneaked into Wu Hongtao's study. Wu Hongtao had just finished scolding Wu Ruofei. When he entered the study and saw Su Yingxue, his heart almost jumped out of his chest. His finger that was pointing at Su Yingxue trembled. You. How did you get in here? If I can get Lord Wu's account book, you don't have to ask me such a stupid question, right? Su Yingxi's attitude was very cold. Chapter 189. The Empress knows very quickly Wu Hongtao was already afraid of her, and now that he had seen her as if he had seen a ghost, he didn't even dare to sit down. "You already know what happened to me. What else did you want? You were just trying to threaten me with this, and one wouldn't compromise either." This matter had already spread like wildfire. It couldn't be resolved just by saying that I wouldn't marry my daughter off. Su Yingxue looked at Wu Hongtao coldly. "Of course, I knew. One came to ask Lord Wu who gave your family such an idea to make the minister's estate lose face and insist on marrying into our Marquis Manor. Did you think that my daughter would only marry into your Marquis Manor?" Wu Hongtao was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. Since Su Yingxue was in the Marquis Manor, Wu Hongtao didn't want Wu Ruofei to marry into the Marquis Manor. With Wu Ruofei's brain, if Su Yingxue wanted to deal with her, she would be dead in a few days. However, no matter how stupid Wu Ruofei was, she was still his biological daughter. He had doted on her for more than 10 years, and he didn't want her to jump into the fire pit of the Marquis Manor. If it wasn't for your brother being unable to control himself, would my daughter have become like this? Wu Hongtao still had a stomach full of anger and nowhere to vent. Lord Wu, don't talk nonsense. Since you didn't come up with the idea, where's your wife? Humph. She was still at her mother's home. If it wasn't for the Empress' decree to announce this marriage at her birthday banquet, one wouldn't have brought that slut back. The blood pressure in Wu Hongtao's chest rose again. Empress? The coldness in Su Yingshi's eyes instantly deepened. The Empress found out too quickly. He even wanted to announce it at her birthday banquet. It seemed that she had to be faster than the Empress. Su Yingxue grabbed Wu Hongtao's collar. Tell me, before Wu Ruofei went to the clinic, who was in contact with her? This? How would one know? You have to ask the servants in the residence. Wu Hongtao was so frightened that his entire body was trembling. He went to check on the people in Wu Ruofei's courtyard. The servants said that Wu Ruofei had only interacted with Su Yuro during this period. Moreover, when Su Yuro was staying in Wu Ruofei's clinic, she often came to the minister's estate to talk to Wu Ruofei's maid, Feng He. Su Yingshi's lips curled up. Manager Qi followed Feng He and couldn't find any clues. So, they met at the minister's estate. This was not surprising. Su Yingxue was about to leave after asking, but she noticed Wu Hongtao's shifty eyes when he stared at her. She returned and smiled at him. I've kept Lord Wu's account book. Chapter 190. Chu Yihan puked blood, however. As soon as night fell, the cold wind blew in through the window and made her feel cold all over. She would remember that night at the Silver Moon Pavilion. Chu Yihan stood beside Hong Lian and insisted on killing Ziwei. He did not hurt her, but he never appeared in front of her again. Even though her brother had such a big accident, she had been feeling a little tired recently. The light on the candlestick suddenly flashed. Su Yingxue suddenly raised her head and felt a chill beside her. She immediately got up. The candlelight reflected Chu Yihan's celestial appearance. His handsome face looked a little pale under the candlelight. He seemed to have just experienced something, and there was still a murderous aura around him. Su Yingxue subconsciously wanted to be concerned. What's wrong? Chu Yihan held her hand. One heard that something happened to you, so I rushed back to, thank you, Your Highness. The warmth from his palm made her face turn cold. Chu Yihan's hand froze in midair, as if he didn't know what to say. He asked, is this how the guard beside you protects you? If it wasn't me who came, but the person who wanted to assassinate you, you would have been in trouble. What's the use of him? There's no need for Your Highness to worry. Ziwei was injured by Your Highness, and I even spent a lot of effort to save his life. Su Yingxue said angrily with a straight face. Chu Yihan sneered. You care about your guard. Naturally. He protected me and risked his life for me. Of course, one care. Your Highness, you have hurt and killed him time and time again. Su Yingxue was so angry that she could not continue. If it was anyone else, she would avenge Ziwei. But this person was Chu Yihan. She couldn't take revenge, nor could she do it. You care about him, but you don't care about me. You don't care if 1 am injured, right? Chu Yihan used the blade to support himself on the floor. His eyes were deep and unfathomable, but his entire body felt cold. Your Highness' martial arts are unrivaled. Who could hurt you? You've always been the only one who hurts others. Even Hong Lian, who you're protecting, is fine. Su Yingxue said angrily. Chu Yihan left as soon as she finished speaking. He turned around coldly, making her eyes redden. Su Yingxue also turned her back angrily. She had only mentioned Hong Lian, and he was already like this. How much he cared about that woman. Puff! Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her. She had wanted to ignore Chu Yihan, but her sensitive nose picked up the scent of blood. Her heart skipped a beat as she hurriedly turned around and rushed out. In the dim hall, Chu Yihan held onto the medicine cabinet with blood at the corner of his mouth. At his feet was a pool of blood that he had just spat out. What happened? How did you get injured? Su Yingshi's face instantly turned pale. She took Chu Yihan to a ward and checked his pulse. She found that he had suffered serious internal injuries, and there was a strong smell of blood on his body. Su Yingshi's heart skipped a beat. Who could hurt you? During this period, where did he go? Chu Yihan leaned against the bed curtain and said in a deep voice, Cannibal Valley. Are you crazy? The Cannibal Valley was filled with poison and ferocious beasts. No one who entered could come out alive. What are you doing there? Su Yingxue stomped her feet in anger. However, whenever she thought of the Cannibal Valley, she would think of the records in her mother's diary. There was a type of spiritual medicine called the divine Lingji grass. It was said to be a 1,000-year-old spiritual medicine, and there were only a few traces of it in ancient books. Whether there is or not, you will know once you investigate. This is a matter between me and the Silver Moon Pavilion. I have already settled it, so you don't have to worry about it. Chu Yihan's voice was weak, but every word he spoke was still firm and resolute. Su Yingshi's heart warmed slightly. She wanted to get some medicine to treat internal injuries. After she boiled it, she asked Chu Yihan to take off his clothes while she applied the medicine to him. Chu Yihan obediently cooperated. Su Yingxue had seen a man's body before since becoming a doctor, but Chu Yihan's exposed upper body made her blush. The lines of his muscles were smooth and distinct. Every muscle seemed to exude a strong force, making one's blood surge. Don't you want to apply medicine? Chu Yihan reminded her when he saw her lowering her head and hesitating. Oh, right, I'm here. Su Yingxue turned around and patted her face to remind herself that she was not only a woman but also a doctor. Chapter 192. A child flirts the god of war. She was only looking at Chu Yihan's body to apply medicine for him. She had no ulterior motives. She applied the medicine to Chu Yihan's body. Most of his injuries were on his back, and there were a few small cuts on his arms as if they were caused by the claws of a beast. Su Yingxue poured some medicinal powder and applied it to him. He did not make a single sound, like a numb wooden man. However, Su Yingxue couldn't help but feel her heartache. She asked in a low voice, These injuries, do they hurt? Chu Yihan shook his head. No, they don't hurt. His fingers gently caressed her face. There was still a thin callus on his fingertips. His touch was very gentle, but it stirred ripples in Su Yingxue's heart. After applying the medicine, she noticed that there were many injuries on his chest. Compared to Ziwei, he was probably not inferior. However, the injuries on his body were caused by weapons. Su Yingxue thought that these were probably scars he had acquired on the battlefield. She touched the scar on his left chest. Although it had faded, she could still discern how severe the injury had been. She murmured, This scar must be over 10 years old. Chu Yihan nodded. Yes, it was from over 10 years ago. It was the first time I went to the battlefield. I was injured by the enemy's general, but I took his life with a spear. That's how this sword wound ended up on my chest. Over 10 years ago, Su Yingxue suddenly reminisced. When Chu Yihan had gone to the battlefield, she had still been a child. When I was little, my grandpa would often hold me and tell stories. One of the stories was about a young prince who fearlessly fought on the battlefield and valiantly defeated his foes. He became famous in just one battle and later became the revered god of war for the entire Great Qing dynasty. She tilted her head and looked at the man before her. Chu Yihan touched the back of her head and playfully tapped the tip of her nose. You've been hearing stories about me since you were little. Did you think I was a mighty warrior? Su Yingxue nodded. Even my grandpa praised the god of war. How could he not be powerful? It's just that, as a nobleman's daughter, I only now have the privilege of admiring the great Qing dynasty's god of war. She meant to flatter him, but Chu Yihan's expression darkened. You don't remember. Don't remember what? Su Yingxue tilted her head, puzzled by Chu Yihan's expression. Had she forgotten something important? You admired me when you were young, Chu Yihan said, his eyes showing displeasure. When I was young? How young? Su Yingxue was filled with question marks. Chu Yihan had never been part of her life. Even in her previous life, she hadn't interacted much with Chu Yihan before her death. Chapter 193. Chu Yihan was the one who collected her corpse. I had this thought before, Chu Yihan answered honestly. At that time, he was 15 years old and had returned from a war. His father had conferred upon him the title of Your Highness and granted him a mansion. He was about to inform his mother of this good news. While walking in the palace, he was accosted by Su Yingxue, this little girl, who grabbed onto his clothes. Su Yingxue's nanny knelt on the ground, trembling. Su Yingxue continued to clutch his clothes, crying incessantly. When he inquired, he discovered that Su Yingxue had wet herself. In his younger days, he possessed a cold demeanor and did not incline to deal with such a small child as Su Yingxue. However, her cries were soft and heartrending, tugging at his heartstrings. He glanced down and beheld this little girl, barely as tall as his thigh, with a complexion as fair as snow. She was undeniably adorable, and her cuteness melted his heart. He proceeded to remove his coat and draped it over Su Yingxue. I still remember that after your nanny wrapped you up, only your little pinkish-white face was visible, yet you struggled to approach me, reaching out as if to hug me. Chu Yihan pinched Su Yingxue's chin and examined her attentively. He could still discern the traces of that tender little face. However, Su Yingxue's face was flushed with embarrassment. She chuckled awkwardly. Thank you, Your Highness, for not kicking me aside. She had seized Chu Yihan's clothes within the imperial palace and insisted on hugging him. Su Yingxue couldn't believe her audacity. How had she mustered such courage? Chu Yihan's decision not to send her flying with a kick was an act of great mercy. What happened after that? Su Yingxue was captivated by his narrative. She sat cross-legged in front of Chu Yihan, inquiring earnestly. After that, suddenly, a cold glint of murderous intent flashed in Chu Yihan's icy eyes. On the very day, he encountered Su Yingxue before he could rush to the palace to share the news of his new royal title with his mother. She had already passed away. In her palace, only her lifeless body remained. Not a single living servant could be found. He had sought out his father, only to find that his father had suddenly fallen gravely ill. When he shared the news of his mother's passing with his father coughed up a mouthful of blood and passed away a few days later. Refusing to attend his father's funeral, he allowed Chu Mingyuan to ascend the throne. He sat alone in his mother's palace, enduring several heavy snowstorms. Due to his temperament, no one dared to approach and console him. Yet, out of nowhere, a daintily adorned little girl appeared. She was clad in a white fox fur coat and a white scarf, her head crowned with snow, resembling a little white ball in the snowy landscape. She approached him with her short, chubby legs and touched his cold face, her voice babyish as she said, "Don't cry, don't cry. You have me." At that time, her speech was still somewhat incoherent. She had come to him with his clothes, but what she said next had left him astonished. "If you give me clothes, I'll give myself to you. I promise." "Give yourself to me?" Su Yingxue suddenly stood up and accidentally bumped her head on the bed's edge, causing her eyes to well up with tears. "Ouch! I have been stood up by you for so many years, and I've never seen you so excited. Why the rush?" Chu Yihan gently massaged the spot where she had bumped her head. Tears welled up in the corners of Su Yingxue's eyes. She was both shocked and delighted. Shocked by her audacity as a child. At 3 years old, she had dared to tease the current Your Highness Chu Yihan. She had teased him, yet he hadn't taken responsibility. She was happy that she finally knew who had collected her corpse in her previous life. It was Chu Yihan. Chu Yihan had remembered her words from childhood for so many years. So, when I confessed to Chu Chengya, Your Highness said I was blind because of this? Su Yingxue found it amusing, but she also felt regretful. Chapter 194. My whole body is soft. Chu Yihan's face darkened. Why don't you go and confess to him again? Let's see what I would do. Su Yingxue boldly teetered on the brink of recklessness and asked, What would you do? You need a partner to confess. If you don't have one, who else can you confess to? The corners of Chu Yihan's mouth curled up. Su Yingxue's entire body trembled. Your Highness, you're so scary. I can be even scarier. Chu Yihan grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace. Su Yingxue's hair stood on end. Your Highness, you, what do you want? Oh. Chu Yihan pressed her head down and kissed her lips. The man's overbearing intrusion caught her off guard. However, even if she were prepared, Chu Yihan could easily handle it. She placed both her hands on Chu Yihan's chest. Beneath her palms, his muscles and blood vessels bulged, and she could almost feel the power of his heartbeat. Oh, no! Chu Yihan pushed her back, and she felt dizzy. When she saw him turn around to pull the bed curtains, she subconsciously screamed. Chu Yihan turned around and gazed deeply at her before getting off the bed. Su Yingxue sat on the bed in a daze with her arms around her knees. She kept thinking about what she should say to reject Chu Yihan if he came in naked later. Your Highness, it's not polite for us to do this. We can't. Whoosh. The bed curtain was lifted, and Chu Yihan was already dressed. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her. It's not polite. What can't we do? We can't. After all, we are still. Su Yingxue wanted to say that she was not married yet, but when she thought of the words she said when she was young, she buried her face in her knees. Chu Yihan picked her up and placed her on his knees. One won't cross the line with you. Before you become the 9th princess consort, one won't do anything to you. 9th princess consort? Su Yingxue raised her blushing face. One didn't say I wanted to be a princess. You want to abandon me? Chu Yihan's eyes were extremely cold. It was like a knife was placed on Su Yingxue's neck. Su Yingxue quickly hugged her head. No. She didn't dare to say the word abandon to Chu Yihan. Afraid of death. Sob. When old General Su returns, one will naturally propose marriage to him. Chu Yihan pinched her little red ears, his hot breath spraying on her neck. Su Yingxue felt her entire body go limp. Everything in front of her seemed so unreal. However, Chu Yihan stood in front of her. Under the light, his silhouette was perfect, and his facial features were deep and exquisite. It was as if he were the most favored masterpiece of the heavens, breaking the fog in front of her. She reached out to Chu Yihan. Your Highness, hug. Chu Yihan carried her up as easily as he could carry a child. Chapter 195. Entering the palace, Miss. Master sent someone to inform you to quickly prepare and enter the palace. Today is the Empress' birthday banquet, and all the officials' wives are invited. Jilan hurriedly approached, her face filled with concern. She was very worried. Master didn't inform you in advance, and now he's telling you suddenly. Miss, could it be dangerous inside the palace? Should we inform eldest young master to protect you? Su Yingxue raised a corner of her lips. Brother will be attending too, but there's no need to trouble him. This time, she was entering the palace to help Su Hao resolve a problem. Miss, even if you don't need eldest young master, time is running out. Let me quickly help you with your makeup. Jilan promptly offered to assist Su Yingxue, heading to her wardrobe to search for suitable attire. Su Yingxue wasn't particularly concerned about dressing up, but she instructed Jilan, find a pink dress. Jilan swiftly complied, saying, Yes, Mississippi. Su Yingxue had spent the entire night working on something and had soaked it in the Medicine King Valley's spirit spring. She needed to retrieve it now to take it into the palace. Jilan helped Su Yingxue change into a peach blossom pink dress and styled her hair in a simple bun. However, Su Yingxue disliked golden hairpins. From the assortment of hairpins that noble Consort Xiao had gifted her, she randomly selected one adorned with carved peach blossoms. This particular hairpin had delicate tassels that hung down, adding a touch of charm to her rosy face. Chu Yihan had remarked that when he first saw her, she was like a cute little doll. On the day she would meet him again, she decided to embrace a cuter appearance. As she left, Su Yingxue held a sachet she had retrieved from the spirit spring. She gave one to Jilan and instructed her to ensure Su Hao wore it. She also tied one onto herself and carried one in her hand as she made her way to the front hall. Su Dingheng and Su Yuro had been waiting in the front hall. When Su Yingxue appeared in her long dress, both were momentarily stunned. Su Dingheng rubbed his eyes, momentarily mistaking her for his late wife. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was indeed Su Yingxue. Having shed her usual tight-fitting attire for the dress, she appeared as beautiful as a dream, identical to how Shu Li had looked in his memories. Su Dingheng couldn't help but feel a pang of emotion. Su Yuris' eyes blazed with jealousy. Su Yingxue was already striking without any effort, and with this attire, she looked even more stunning. Today, she had spent 2 hours getting ready, but she still couldn't match Su Yingxue's effortless charm. It made her grit her teeth in frustration. Why did Su Yingxue have to be so beautiful, provoking jealousy in others? Younger sister. Su Hao strolled over, and upon seeing Su Yingxue in her peach blossom dress, he was taken aback. Her delicate oval face, porcelain-like complexion, and captivating eyes, which blinked at him playfully, melted his heart. In his memory, his mother had been similarly breathtaking and a bit mischievous. "Brother, you're here. Do you have a sachet one made that suits your taste?" Su Yingxue asked, smiling sweetly at him. Su Hao held the sachet and smiled gently. "Since my sister made it, it's undoubtedly the best. But why do you have another one in your hand?" Su Hao noticed she already had one tied to herself and was holding a white one in her hand. Su Yingxue approached Su Yuro and said with a tender smile, "This one is, of course, for my younger sister. The 3 of us, siblings, each get one. How could we leave my younger sister without one?" "Thank you, sister, for your kind thoughts. Today, they'll be wearing the jade pendant bestowed by the Empress, so it wouldn't be suitable for me to wear a sachet," Su Yuro replied gently, though her heart sneered at the idea of wearing such trinkets. Chapter 196. Wearing the sachet ruer. This is your sister's intention. How can you refuse it like this? Su Dingheng spoke up. Su Yuro was taken aback. Her father rarely sided with Su Yingxue. He had always favored her. Su Yingxue's lips curved into a cold, mocking smile. Su Dingheng had been fixedly studying her face. It seemed he was recalling her mother. Su Yingxue decided to follow his gaze and continue her act. She feigned a somewhat aggrieved expression. Younger sister received a reward from the Empress, so she no longer values what her sister has made. But I thought that since the 3 of us rarely attend banquets together, and it was the Empress' birthday, one made a few sachets hoping that it would show our family in a harmonious light to outsiders. However, since younger sister doesn't appreciate it, well, then let's forget about it. Su Yingxue said with a saddened look. She looked exactly like her mother. Su Dingheng's heart sank. Su Hao's gaze towards Su Yuro turned colder. "Since you don't care about your family, it's fine if my sister and I skip the banquet today. You can go alone." Su Hao had never been warm towards Su Yuro. Now that he had spoken, Su Yuro was in a panic. "What are you saying, brother? It's just a sachet. How can you be so angry over it? Plus, there's an important matter related to you at today's banquet. How can you not attend?" Su Yuro appeared weak on the surface, but felt quite repulsed inside. In the past, Su Hao had not been eloquent, rarely speaking. However, after spending time with Su Yingxue, his words now carried a sharp edge, leaving her no room for retreat. Considering Su Hao's status, Su Dingheng reminded Su Yuro, Ruer, it's just a sachet. You should wear it. The sachet looks exquisite. I believe it will add to your charm. Su Dingheng had said so, and Su Yuro had no reason to refuse. She clenched her teeth, put away the sachet, and tied it around her waist. Then, she thanked Su Yingxue with a forced smile. Thank you, sister, for your kind gesture. Su Yingxue smiled knowingly when she saw her wear it. Sister, no need to be so formal. After all, we're family. Family? Su Yuris' eyes were filled with doubt. Suddenly, she wasn't in a hurry to enter the palace. She wanted to pry open Su Yingxue's mind and see if something was amiss with her. How could those words possibly come from her? The two of them were incompatible like oil and water. With doubt in her mind, Su Yuro boarded the carriage. The Marquis Manor was not a small household, so it was impossible for the three young masters and young misses to squeeze into a single carriage to enter the palace. Su Yingxue and Su Hao took one carriage in the front, while Su Yuro rode alone in the carriage behind them. As Su Yuro watched Su Yingxue and Su Hao board their carriage, her mind was filled with question marks. Today, something had to be wrong with Su Yingxue. Yuan Rua noticed her frown and asked, "What is Miss still worried about?" Your plan went unnoticed by the eldest young master and the eldest young miss. The eldest young master is usually quite aloof. Today, he had no choice but to enter the palace obediently. Once the Empress announces his marriage to Miss Wu, the two siblings won't be able to change it, no matter how reluctant they are. Yuan Rua said a lot to lift Su Yuris' spirits. However, Su Yuris' brows remained tightly furrowed. She couldn't help but wonder what scheme Su Yingxue and Su Hao were playing. Su Hao being summoned to the palace was no ordinary matter. Even if he were foolish, he could probably guess that Wu Ruafei would also attend the Empress' birthday banquet today. Follow current novels on Top Novel Full. CM that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.